Councilmember Baker here?
Present.
Councilmember Khalid? Councilmember Khalid? Councilmember Reeves? Councilmember Gilliard? I'm sorry, Councilmember Gilliard?
Here.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Willis? Councilmember Willis? Councilmember Gomes? Councilmember Gomes? Councilmember Rao?
Present. Present.
Also present is Mayor Edwards, City Manager, Mr. Donald, City Attorney, Mr. Walker. You have a quorum.
Okay, let's do the first item, please, announce the first item.
The first item on the agenda is council discussion on removal of personal properties from City of South Fulton Digest and financial impact, finance.
I understand, Mr. Manager, we're joined with somebody from the finance department.
Yes, well, not necessarily just the finance department. We have our city treasurer, as always, who oversees this work, but he has also invited a representative from Arthur Ferdinand's office, I believe, or the Fulton County tax assessor's office, which I believe is more appropriate. And so I will defer to him for that introduction.
Good afternoon, Mayor and the City Council. I did invite Mr. Pinckney from this tax assessor's office. I don't know, Ms. White, if he has registered, he's in.
Yes, they're in.
Okay. So if you would present, if you would bring up the tax digest that I'll base on my discussion this afternoon, and they can take over from there. We requested the information, and I've got the information past 3, which I will not be basing on that because we have not gone through the information that I've sent late. I wanted it to come on time. We'll go through it, check with the appropriate personnel, but we have never done that. But I'll be able to discuss and hear from him. So I'll focus on this. We will stay on this tax digest, which is 2020 tax digest and 5-year history of levy. And it will be on the second line. The first line you have on your left is real, that's real property. Then the second one is personal property. That's where our discussion will be. And before I'll start my discussion with a question that I want each and every council member to help me or our representative from Fulton County Tax Assessor's Office to help us to address that. My question would be, when the city was being incorporated in 2017, I had drawn and approved map, and I believe that all real and personal properties for the state of South Fulton were within those boundaries. But now my question would be, has those boundaries changed that all properties are being disputed out of those boundaries because boundaries have changed, now they go into other jurisdictions? That would be my first question that I wanted to. If there were values being decreased within our boundaries, that would be different. But we have properties being moved from the city limits into other jurisdiction. And I'm not seeing the report that I got. Maybe I missed it. I didn't see any change of property from other jurisdiction into our city. If they're there may be very few. But almost the majority of them, they're coming from our city into other jurisdictions. Has those boundaries changed? That would be my first place to start with. And I would also like to know, every year, our tax assessor's office has never found it important that we are losing millions and millions of personal values into other jurisdictions. not to let us know that this is what is happening in your city. We have seen this every year through the tax digest. As you recall, last year, we got the information when we had the retreat, tax retreat at the hotel. We had to go back and make some changes again. So I wanted to take you back in that second line so you can see what changes and what financial impact these reductions of personal property from the city into the surrounding jurisdictions has done. And in 2017, we had the personal property 1.1 billion. 1.1. So it's 1,134,210,892. That's in 2017 with the drawn boundaries for the new incorporated city. In 2018, personal property were reduced. If you go in the 2018 column, you find out that it moved from 1.1 billion into 908 million. And that's a reduction of 225,537,422 value of personal property went out of the city of South Fulton. And in 2018, if you take 2018 into 2019, in 2019, again, there was a reduction from 908 million of 2018 into 647,155,963 in 2019. And that was a reduction of 261,517,499 worth of personal values that the city of South Fulton lost into other jurisdictions. And in 2020, if you get into column of 2020, second line, second row, it's 516,169,211, moving from 647 of the previous year. So if you add all of those from 2017 through to 2020, we started with 1.1 billion, and in 2020, we are 516. That's a total loss of 618 million and 41,680 worth of personal property moving out of city of South Fulton into neighboring jurisdictions. I ask that question again. When we became the city, we had boundaries. Have those boundaries changed that now those properties, they belong into other areas? Or what has made it that was not there in 2017? I can't answer that question, but I would love to have the tax assessor's office. And with that, if you see, this is just an example. If you were to go with me, 1, 2, 3, column number 3 from the bottom, you'll find out that on 2018, look at 2018 when we had a full levy. 2017, as you know, we had about 6 months, 5 months. But 2018, where the cursor is, we levied $30.6 million. And if you go in 2020, 3 years down the line, even with the higher mileage rate, which is 12.899, we don't even go to that. In 2018, it was 11.579 mils, but we levied $30.6 million. Now, even if we increase millage rate from 11.579 to 12.899, we still don't go to levy of what we levied in 2018 because of that 618 million loss of personal property. And that has taken a toll on the city. Every year, this is the first year in the incorporation of the city that the city had to think even of increasing the millage rate. Not even increasing the millage rate, this is the first time in the incorporation of the city that the rollback has gone beyond the millage rate of 11.579. From 11.579 to 12.399 mils. Because if we are to levy the very same value of what we did last year, we couldn't make it because of the value of personal property that has been moved from the city. For us to levy the same amount of money that we did last year, the tax commissioner's office, they had to increase the millage rate rollback to 12.399 mils, which is an increase to our residents. So with that, I think I will have maybe council if they have anything to add before we ask our tax assessor's office if they have any comment or if they have any question to add in what I've said. But my real focus is I want to know if you know anything of, or we don't know, that we don't know about the boundaries, because that's the only way I can say the boundaries have changed. We made a mistake here, they belong into here. Has the boundaries changed that now we are losing property into other jurisdiction? I'll give this one first to our elected officials. If you have got a question before I hand over or they hand over to our tax assessor to enlighten us.
Well, I think you've made a case for whatever it is. We're not talking about thousands of dollars here. We're talking about millions of dollars. I'm sure me and my colleagues are very anxious to hear what the tax assessors people have to say. So I would go directly to his comment. Mr. Pinckney?
Yes, I'm here.
Go right ahead. You heard the questions from our people. Just go ahead and answer them, please.
Yes, Mr. Malazi, on your first question about the boundaries, you are correct. The boundaries themselves have not changed. But what happens is personal property is reported to us on returns that we send out annually to the taxpayers. Since the incorporation, the city of South Fulton retained the tax district of 55, which was everything that was unincorporated in Fulton County at the time of incorporation. And so when a lot of those companies send us their report, they're still listing their returns as in 55. And my staff has to go through and determine whether it is in the right tax district or not. And what we have found in all of the incorporations since I've been here over 20 years is that it takes a few years to make sure that you get all of that personal property listed on our digest in the correct jurisdiction. And that is what has happened here, and that's what's happened with other incorporations as well, is when we realize that we are taxing a particular business in one district, and it really, according to their address, should be in another. Now, personal is a lot different from real estate in that real estate is sitting on the ground and it has a parcel number attached to it. And that parcel number, we definitely know which district that parcel is in. But the personal property are account numbers that are not tied to those parcel numbers. Mm-hmm. And so we have to manually go in and put those in the right district. Even though we run some reports and compare them to the real estate, a lot of them don't get caught until our staff actually are working those accounts and process them. We found that most of the ones that have moved out of, that we changed from the city of South Fulton were changed into the Fulton Industrial District because in that corridor, there are a lot of streets that run out of that district into the city of South Fulton. But we found that most of those accounts, and Ms. Malaga, I know you may not have had a chance to look at the report that I sent you a little while ago, but I'm looking at that, and 99% of those are in that area of the Fulton County Airport, where there are a lot of high dollar planes that are actually in the Fulton Industrial District and not in 55. And we've corrected those because we have to put them in the correct district. And that's where throughout the last few years, that's where most of that change has come from, where we've put them in the correct district. A lot of them we find when we're doing audits, my staff find it ourselves, but then we also have taxpayers who get a tax bill for their real property in the Fulton Industrial District, and then realize that they're getting a tax bill from the city of South Fulton for their personal property. And then we realize that we need to put that personal property in the right district. And so that's essentially what has happened over the last few years as we process these returns and make sure that they report them to us in the right district.
So let me understand something, because I'm a bit confused. Real property, I own a warehouse, Fulton Industrial, okay? I have personal property in that warehouse. Are you saying that the personal property does not go along with the real property?
It does go along with it, but there are two different account numbers. The real estate is a real property parcel number. The personal property is an account number that we assign for that particular address, but it's not tied to that real property. So we have to make sure that we put it in the correct district. It's not going to automatically go there because it's not a real property parcel.
Does the law state that that's the way it goes? It's a bit confusing to me. I mean, if I'm home, so at my house, I got a home and I got real property. And so do you tax my personal property too inside my home, or just commercial?
No, just commercial business personal property.
It seems the theory should be the same. I'm still a little bit confused. And Mr. Donald, you kind of get what he's saying?
Yes, sir. So what he's saying is he's saying you basically have your real property, and so that is very easy to track. It's just like you mentioned your house, but it's their commercial business, and so they pay taxes on that through account number 267. But then their personal property that is assigned or associated with that business is going to be account 289, and so they have automatically right-sized account 287. But over time, over the last few years, I think we had a similar issue last year where it was reduced and we didn't necessarily get notification, but we were able to identify that those values were reduced. I think the challenge is we were not expecting for this reduction to occur yet again this year. And it sounds like what he's saying is that they are continuing the audit, so they removed additional property from our overall tax digest. Am I understanding that right, sir?
That's correct.
So why was this an issue at the time of incorporation?
Why wasn't it an issue?
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand. I'm a bit confused. And when you're talking about millions of dollars, I get even more confused. But at the time of incorporation, was our finance department made aware of this fact?
Well, no. At the time of incorporation, we made an attempt to make sure that we could pull them in the right district, but of course we couldn't. We're not able to do all of them because, like I said, they are not tied directly to a real property parcel. And so you may have a street that a certain number of the addresses are actually in Fulton Industrial District, and then once you cross a certain address, they're actually in the city of South Fulton. So it's not as easy to be able to say, well, this street we know is in the city of South Fulton and in the city of South Fulton only. That's not the case because of how all of those streets go out of one district into another. And it does that on several different areas where you adjoin other cities. It does that because there are so many streets there because of the boundaries of South Fulton.
So, Mr. Laws, I will get you. So I'm understanding. Let's go back. 2017, I'm a city. Was anyone in Fulton County said, be aware now that you are a city, but this could possibly happen to your personal property as we go in and make adjustments, and this is how we done it. Did anyone say that?
That I don't know.
Okay. Mr. Malazi, go ahead.
You have said that the assessor's office assign these addresses or you assign these accounts. Is that correct?
We assign the account numbers, yes.
So if you assign these account numbers to these businesses, is it correct that you did assign to start with and you are correcting your own assigning mistakes?
Well, we're correcting the ones, yes, that we did not find, that we did not put in the right district originally. Now, also keep in mind that, like I said, those accounts started and they have that 55 district. We had to take them out of 55 and put them into 70. And we originally realized it when, like I said, we were looking at the street names and trying to assign it by the street names, but we also have to look at the address because that actual place that it's sitting on the ground, that business sitting on the ground, could be in one district or the others. And so that's how some of them were missed.
So my main concern, Mayor Edwards and the council, is they assigned the accounts prior to incorporation. And they went again to find out that according to what he's saying, they incorrectly assigned. And now they are making those changes to determine where those businesses belong to without us knowing that changes are taking place. I told you that from the tax digest, we started at 1.1 billion. Now we are at 516 million. We have lost more than half, and it has been every year. So we don't know next year where we will be. And the surprising is there is no reallocating of accounts that are moving from other districts into city of South Fulton, but they are correcting the mistake of what was assigned to the city of South Fulton into where now they determine they actually belong. And we don't know that. So it will not be surprising next year to move from 500 into 400 into 300.
If what he's
Well,
saying,
I can't say what it will change
correct,
to. I'm sorry, go ahead.
if what he's saying is correct, Mr. Pinckney, that provides a problem for me. And then the other thing I don't have a concern about, when does it stop? I mean, we're making forecasts as to how our budgets are going to be. And, with this particular deal, when does it stop? When would you have all of the parcels that you need to have in Fulton Industrial, so we can come back with what we look for on our budgets?
Well, one of the things that we're going to do this year is to do an in-depth audit on those, on all of those parcels in that corridor, to make sure that we have them all, and if there are any that need to change, that we can identify those and let you know of any that will be changing for next year. But that's one of our main goals as we just finished doing, and we're working to finish our digest for 2020. And then we're going to do that audit. And I have a certain team that I'm going to put together to make sure that we focus on that area and make sure all of those are in the right district. Do also realize that you will also have parcels, and this just happens annually, where a business may be in South Fulton today, and then they notify us next year that, hey, we moved to Sandy Spring. And so we have to move it out. So it's gonna happen. It won't happen as drastically as the numbers that you see now, because for instance, I'm looking on this spreadsheet that I sent Mr. Malazi, and
Yes,
I have 4 airplanes here that total $110 million that were moved from 55 to 70. That's just 4 airplanes. And so when you add all of those numbers up with the different planes and the businesses, that number can get to be pretty high. That's why it's been such a drastic decrease over the last few years.
Let me just say this, my queue is not working. They just told me that Mr. Khalid, Dr. Rao, and Councilwoman Willis are on. So I'm gonna start with Mr. Khalid, and I apologize, I didn't see, you're not coming up in my queue, but they're gonna try to fix that. Go ahead, Mr. Khalid.
I think some of my questions were answered in the chat, but just for the benefit of folks watching. The property that has been transferred. Well, first, let me ask this: how much of this is the properties, and does any of this have to do with the exemptions that do any of these lower collections have to do with the exemptions that we have passed?
I was going to add that. Realize that you have added some new exemptions since your incorporation. That is gonna that reduces your overall income, and then you've also added Freeport exemption as well, which you did not have in that first year of incorporation. And so another big hit that you had was once you added that Freeport exemption along with those other homestead exemptions, that makes your overall collection low. That is completely separate from this personal property issue that we're talking about, but it is in conjunction with that, because once you add those additional exemptions, then you have to account for that in your estimation and your budgeting.
So just a note to our finance person, I would love in some future meetings to just see how much of a difference those are making, so that as we consider homestead exemptions in the future, we have some sort of historical data to show this is the impact that the last set had. Are there any, I understand that there are properties that are coming out of our city. Are there any that are coming into our city? I'm thinking namely of the hotel on Ella Lane, the Fairfield Inn and Suites. There was a moment when people didn't know what part of that was, whether that parcel was in the city of South Fulton or not, and then we found out that it was. So I'm just wondering, are any of these errors happening in our favor?
Yes, they are. And on the spreadsheet that I sent there, you can also see the list of parcels that we've added into the city as well.
Awesome. I had another question, but I'm going to yield to whoever's next.
I think I'm up next. Question, I think if I recall from previous conversations, there are approximately 700 parcels in the Fulton industrial area. Given the impact, it seems conceivable that between the tax assessor's office and our finance team, that we should be able to look, or that team should be able to work together to go through that list. Although it may be based on Councilman Khalid's a bigger problem, because it may require us to look at all of our boundaries adjacent to cities to make sure that's not, I would think the biggest ones would be on Fulton Industrial. And so I know if you go currently in the Fulton County Tax Assessors database, I have commonly encountered where I would put in an address and it would show both Fulton County, it'll show an address assigned to two different parcels. So I don't know if that's part of the cleanup that needs to take place. And so you have to, click on to see which one is currently listed. So I think this look should not be a one-sided look, and it should involve members of both sides. Again,
Mr. Mayor, you on mute?
I was on mute.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Let me say this before you start, Ms. Willis, that those of us who come in to speak, you come into the queue in order, and I will call that order as I see it. It was supposed to be Ms. Willis, but now I'll allow her to speak now. Ms. Willis, go ahead.
Yes, and so my question is this a problem because we have not annexed the area? Well, one of the things that will alleviate this from happening is if these parcels or if the annexation takes place, and so if the annexation takes place, then that would alleviate this from happening on a yearly basis.
Yep.
I'm asking the question to, I guess that would be, I guess that's a legal question.
Are you asking the city attorney?
Yes.
It sounded like a financial. Can you clarify again to make sure I heard it right?
Well, it's the impact is financial. The question is dealing with annexation.
Okay, can you clarify?
What I am saying is that from what it looks like is happening is that we're losing parcels that should not be assigned to the city of South Fulton. And he's according to Mr. Pinckney, these are parcels that should be on the roll of unincorporated. And my question is, if the area was annexed into the city of South Fulton, will that alleviate this issue?
Yeah, yeah, so it sounds like they were improperly cataloged or marked, and then now they've done some amendments to reflect that it's still unincorporated, and you're asking if we annex that, will it kind of negate everything and bring it back to the status as if they were in South Fulton?
Yeah.
Yes, because it appears to me that what's happening is we're having this issue because we have these parcels that's not a part of the city. Is that correct, Mr. Pinckney?
That's correct.
Yeah, if we bring these issues to these businesses and they're willing to help us fix it, I mean, that's just a matter of that can be accomplished almost immediately. It's just, obviously it's subject to the businesses being agreeable to, kind of fixing the situation.
And I know this is probably something we have to discuss in litigation or in executive session, because we had a firm supposed to be working on this for us, and we have not received the update, I know, in over 6 months. So I would love to know where we are with that. And I will leave that to executive session because I know we can't do that together.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Willis. Well, I think we had enough information. It would take some further discussion, either in executive session or one-on-one with Mr. Malazi. So I want to move forward to the next item. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Y'all have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pinckney, for coming.
You're welcome. We'll be in touch with you.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
The next item on the agenda is council discussion on the conservation easement agreement, CDRA.
Mayor, give them 1 second to unmute, please.
All right.
Ms. Reed, are y'all there? I see you. Oh, she's taking off.
Get some feedback.
Mr. Donald, Christina is there. She's unmuted.
Got it. You ready to? You can go right ahead and proceed. I saw y'all getting on. Ms. Cummings?
I'm having a hard time hearing. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you repeat what you just said? Because I'm in the field, so I was having a hard time hearing.
Yeah, this is y'all's item. I believe you and Ms. Reed are coming on for the conservation item, and then I think the council is going to add the CDBG conversation at the end, and I'll lead that. I know y'all are still transitioning from that meeting, but the item was actually second and not last. And Mayor, can we actually move to the next item? Because I think you know, but for the good of the public, we met with Fulton County to address a CDBG opportunity that was kind of an emergency situation where we got some quality news, but it's thrown everyone off to where I'm able to hop on at 4, but they're behind. So if
Let's
you
do
could
this.
move to
Let's
the
do
next
this.
item so they can get to the
Let's move that to the end along
Okay.
with your additional item that you want to talk about. And then we'll bring up, Madam Clerk, number 3, discussion of resolution activating downtown development.
Got it. Okay. Thank y'all for that concession.
Okay, council discussion on resolution activating a downtown development authority. Council members Khalid, Baker, and Reeves.
Okay, Khalid, Baker, Reeves, you have the floor.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm going to just share my screen real quick and then turn it over to Mr. Bullitt. So, this is a conversation we've been having for a while. I think that this is the perfect segue after the conversation that we just had about taxes and losing parcels in our tax digest. We know that Old National, pictured here in the red line, is the largest commercial corridor currently in the city. It has the highest density of people, transit, and businesses. And we have lots of commercial property, both undeveloped and underdeveloped. And the goal of this South Perimeter Development Authority is to just prioritize the development of this huge swath of commercial properties that is one exit from the world's busiest airport at the south end of the perimeter, which has seen development at every other side, and in between highways 85 and 75. So it's just suited to be super successful. The I do want to talk about a project that we had specifically planned for this the last time we we're going to have this vote. So there are projects attached. So I'm not just asking for this to be approved for no reason. There are projects for hundreds of apartments. They would be the first new apartments on Old National in over 40 years. And the first phase was supposed to be senior housing. You're going to be hearing a lot about senior housing in the Old National area, not only in this meeting, but in our next meeting. And so with that, I do want to turn it over to Tab Bullitt with Willow 8 Properties to talk about the project that we've been working on for the past year. And hopefully, if we can get this DDA passed, we can move on to do.
Before he comes on, let me ask a question. The conversation here is concerning the DDA.
Yes.
As to whether we want to do that or not.
Yes.
How is a development gonna help us to determine that?
So the point of development authorities, as you know, Mr. Mayor, is to build things. And so this would be the first thing that we are building. Another important feature to understand about the DDA is that it requires us to write a revitalization plan for the area. Now, we can build new workforce housing and write revitalization plans without a downtown development authority. If we do that, we probably write it with Aerotropolis or ARC. But if we write it with the Downtown Development Authority, we will have 7 members of the city of South Fulton who would be in charge of the process. And they would also oversee the design and operation of the facility. So having this, in addition to generating revenue for the city through increased commercial property taxes, would also generate revenue for the city through service fees. And it would also allow citizens to have the maximum amount of control over project sites. And so I think that Mr. Bullock can explain that a little bit better.
I'm gonna allow Mr. Bullock to speak. I still have the issue as to whether that's gonna be something that's important that would make me change my mind or go either way on the development authority based on one development. So, Mr. Bullock, we'll give you time to speak.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Mayor Edwards. Thank you, Councilman Khalid, for this opportunity. I spoke to you all approximately a year and a half ago, I believe it was, when we were originally identifying sites. And I've stayed in contact with Councilman Khalid. We've been working with Shannon James at Aerotropolis. And recently I've had some brief communications with Christopher Pike, just kind of about our proposals. And recently, Councilman Khalid updated me on this proposed South Perimeter Development Authority that we hope our proposed development that we were originally looking to do would fit within. And what I indicated to him is I thought a great opportunity for the city would be this South Perimeter Development Authority that would focus along the Old National, would really have an opportunity to give those residents in the Old National Corridor, the area that the South Perimeter Development Authority would target, a real say-so and control over what happens, as well as providing city council and mayor to participate as it relates to any rezoning. So what we're looking at doing right now is a larger mixed use development or mixed income development with senior and family. And, you know, we were hoping to get this deal kicked off a year and a half ago, so that we would be breaking ground this year. But obviously there are several factors that kind of prohibit us from doing that. But we're wanting to show kind of now the concepts, the aspects that we are hoping to bring to the city of South Fulton through the South Perimeter Development Authority and a revitalization plan, redevelopment plan that they may come up with, again, created by the residents. And so if I have the ability to share, I'll kind of share my screen to show what I'm essentially looking at and what we're hoping to provide for the city of South Fulton. So if everybody can see, we've engaged recently with an architect firm out of Birmingham, Alabama called David Baker Architects. And they specialize in the infill and urban revitalization through the affordable housing and market rate housing design realm. And this is a property in Charleston, South Carolina, that has won several awards from HUD and other design critics across the nation. And this is something similar to that we would like to propose bringing, and we think would be a great fit for the city of South Fulton. It's called Williams Terrace. And it's a large development located on a very small tract of land. So it's intended to be infill and promote mass transportation. So anywhere along Old National where we would be able to access MARTA lines, we think it would be a great opportunity.
Excuse me a minute, sir.
Yes, sir.
Because right now I think I'm in a zoning meeting.
Oh, no, sir. This is just to kind of show what the South Perimeter Development Authority.
I understand, but I'm trying to segue myself into the possibility of forming a DDA and what you're saying. And I think I've heard more of what you're saying when I'm listening to zoning, because there are protocols and procedures that you go through before you get to the point where you tell us what you're telling now.
Yes, sir.
That's my issue. So if you want to tell me how great the DDA is, then let's talk about that. But I feel like I'm in a zoning meeting right now.
Oh, well, I apologize for coming across that way. That was not my intent. So the point of, I guess, what I was trying to relay is the South Perimeter Development Authority, it being created, would provide an opportunity for residents in that community the South Perimeter DDA would serve. It would give them the ability to demand housing of this nature or whatever nature they want to have come to the area, it would give them full control instead of having some outsiders come in and say, hey, Zimmerman property wants to develop this. Let's just have the council vet it and then go through the process. Well, why not turn that process of vetting deals over to a development authority, such as the one proposed? Let them vet it, make sure it meets their requirements that are in the best interest for the old national overlay area before it ever comes to the city. And if it doesn't, then you prohibit it and you don't waste the time, if you will, for lack of a better way, of city council's time.
And if I could just hop in, Tab, when this was first brought to us, Mayor, it actually, I had a meeting with the housing authority, the Fulton County Housing Authority. They had a different vision for this site. They wanted to see more affordable housing. Obviously, they have a lot of voucher recipients that are being displaced in Atlanta, and they need a place to put them. When the South Perimeter Development Authority got involved, we changed the look of the project so that it would be a more live, work, play community, because we know as South Fulton citizens, that's where our zoning and overlays are headed. But we also changed the mix of housing. So the housing that we're looking at now is more market rate. After the senior housing, the second phase has more market rate units in it than it did when it was through the housing authority. And those kinds of controls are what you get when it is a community-led project and not led by an outside agency.
I'm listening.
Mayor, I'm in the queue.
Oh,
Is your
he
queue
just-
working yet?
I'm in the queue as well.
If I just have a couple more minutes, I would like to, because I saw some questions about the Citywide Development Authority, and I would like to bring our financial advisor.
My question is
Hold on. Oh, Ms. Willis, if you got something to say, will you direct it to the chair?
Mayor, I am
still on the clock.
Yeah, I'm directing it to you. You cutting me off. My question is directed to you. My question
what you got to say.
question is, I didn't ask, I'm not directing, I need to ask the developer, not Mr. Khalid, a question.
Okay.
And if you're using a queue, can we all be consistent with that? Because
yes, I am using the queue and I am using the clock. So right now, Mr.
Seems like you're timing Mr. Khalid.
See, like you're on Mr. Khalid is still on the clock. You are first in the queue.
Okay, so just with the balance of time, I would like to bring our city financial advisor, Mr. Ed Wall, online to talk about some of these questions about what is the benefit of having an additional development authority in our city.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Many cities have a citywide development authority, and they also have a DDA as well. Forest Park has 2. Hateville has 2. You all can assign tasks that are more narrow to one development authority over another. The policy issue of whether you want to assign a DDA specifically to the area around Old National and call it the South Perimeter Development Authority is a pure policy decision on your part. Some cities do have 2.
Thank you, Mr. Wall.
Is it, Mr. Wall, would it be, just as a follow-up question for your presentation, is it helpful can the cities leverage more projects at one time with multiple organizations, or does the number of authorities not affect what the leverage can be for bonds?
So there's no
projects.
So like the Fulton County Building Authority, the legislature put a cap on how much bonds they could issue. The development authority doesn't have a similar cap. So there's not a cap on how much they can do, but the more people you put to a task, probably the more you can accomplish with more people trying to get it done.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right,
that concludes my presentation, and I will open the floor up to questions.
Well, I'll.
I'm sorry.
No, sir. The next speaker up is Ms. Willis.
Go ahead.
Ms. Willis, go right ahead. Ms. Willis, are you muted? Ms. Willis, are you muted?
I don't
Madam Clerk,
call
Madam
any
Clerk,
longer.
huh?
She may have fallen off. I don't see her on here.
I'm here. I'm back.
Okay,
My
go ahead.
computer
Go ahead, Ms.
went out, Mayor.
All
Yes.
right, go.
Mr. Walls, I mean, good seeing you again, and thank you. You've been before our council before to discuss this.
Yes, ma'am, I have.
You all may call it a downtown perimeter. I mean, you all may call it a perimeter, but essentially what it is trying to create a downtown development authority. In order to create a downtown development authority, we have to designate the area as our downtown area, correct?
I believe that's correct. I'd like Attorney Walker to comment on it, but I believe that's
because
correct.
that's what the resolution that Khalid forwarded over to our council says. So I'm just trying to figure out, why are we having this conversation again when the community has overwhelmingly opposed designating the area as our downtown?
That's a legal question. I don't know, Councilman Willis.
Attorney Walker.
Yes, Councilwoman Willis.
Is that what we're doing? Trying to designate this area as a downtown for the city of South Fulton?
So the downtown designation is to receive the authority and the benefits under the Downtown Development Authority statute. It's a state
I understand
statute.
that. What I am asking you is that what this is doing? Are we trying to designate the area as our downtown area?
And Ms. Willis, please allow her to answer the question. Go right ahead.
Yeah. So what I was saying is that you have a bubble of benefits that you get if you classify something as a downtown area. So under the state code, you can have 3 areas that you classify. You can have 2 areas. I mean, there's no limit of areas. It just has to meet the standard to classify that area. But you can have multiple areas that you give authority to use the benefits of the Downtown Development Authority code. So you don't necessarily have to limit it to one particular area. And I think with what Councilman Khalid is doing is he doesn't want the public to think just because you have designated this as an area to receive those benefits, that it's actually going to be your primary downtown. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why he's changed the name, so that people won't get that misconception.
Mayor,
Yeah, I'm listening. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go right ahead.
I understand all of the stuff she's saying. We've gone through this before. I mean, we had a big debacle about this in our community before. We understand what can happen under a downtown development authority, but we have gone through a comprehensive master plan, and this is not the area that we are priming to be our downtown. We've already discussed this. Mr. Bullock, let me ask you a question. Can you not work with our current development authority? I have seen several cities, they don't even have a downtown development authority. They have a development authority that's citywide, which we currently have. Can you not do this project with our current development authority?
Our plan would be to work with the development authority, but if the South Perimeter Development Authority is also created, it would, under our program, satisfy 2 different aspects. So the South Fulton Development Authority that's already created would act as the bond issuer. The South Perimeter Development Authority would act as a community engagement vehicle for the oversight and architectural and services control that would also help us garner additional consideration for funding.
But we would have to designate, according to our attorney, this area to be our downtown area. And that is not what this council.
That's not my understanding of a DDA. My understanding is the same as your legal counsel, is that designating it as a DDA does not make it the DDA for South Fulton. You can look at it, think of it more as a revitalization area that has a development authority. and it's just organized or appointed as a downtown development authority because it is a commercial retail services hub for the city. So my understanding from the last time this conversation was brought up, there could be 3, 4, 5 areas that some may deem worthy of a downtown development authority area. I do not see under the development authority regulations any restriction rather to be able to do that. So what Councilman Khalid is trying to do is really more for, let's get a development authority in place for Old National, and let's call it South Perimeter, so that it's not confusing city council or residents of the community that Old National is the downtown.
I hate to Mr. Bullard, I hate to interrupt you, but no, that is not how that works. Our city attorney and our financial advisor just stated that in order for this area to be considered a DDA, Downtown Development Authority, we have to designate it as a downtown, as our downtown.
As a downtown, not the downtown.
Mr. Pike, can you speak on this issue? Because when I had conversation with you in the past, it's my area that we can't have multiple areas.
Good morning, Mayor, and good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So your district for your downtown, if you're going to establish a DDA, your boundaries have to be contiguous. So you can't have an area for DDA on Old National and then have an area somewhere else in the city as designated DDA. They have to be contiguous boundaries. They can't be separate. So you're not going to be able to have multiple. Wherever the city elects to establish it, that's where it has to be.
I mean, I yield to my colleague, Councilmember.
Okay. Okay. Councilmember Rao, you're next.
I have a couple questions about the particular parcel that Mr. Bullard referenced. Is this land currently owned by your company? Is it owned by the Fulton County Housing Authority?
We're actually not under contract on any land. We were previously. We maintained control of that for approximately 1 year, but as that site fell out of viability, because we could not get a revitalization plan done, we've since terminated, and now it's owned by the original seller. So we are not working as of this moment with the South Fulton Development Authority or the Housing Authority of Fulton County.
Okay, so this is not really an active project then, because if you don't have an option to purchase, it reverts back to the Fulton County Housing Authority. So for whatever happens on this land, there has to be some concurrence because they are the property owners.
No, they do not own the property. It's owned by private individuals. It was a site that we had under control. We were looking to partner with the Housing Authority of Fulton County. That was never entered into, and the Fulton County Housing Authority never acquired the property. So it is owned by the 3 original property owners that we had contracted with.
Okay, so my second question, do you still have the desire to move forward on this project?
Yes, ma'am. We feel that there is a huge need for the type of housing that we're proposing, and even more so with the revised scope that we've been able to work through since we began on this endeavor. The senior housing component we feel very strongly in and would be willing to pursue under a revitalization agreement if one were created. Unfortunately, the ARC Commission revitalization process is on hold for now. So you would have to wait for an RFP to open back up through the ARC, the Atlanta Regional Commission, to apply for a revitalization plan to cover the area of Old National that we were targeting. And that was one aspect that said that Councilman Khalid thought would be good, is instead of going through ARC and having to go along their timelines and their protocols, what if we just did it ourselves through our own specific development authority for Old National?
I guess to me, this even gets into questions of equity, because I think we've heard this from a number of council people. We have identified, I think it's 9 economic development nodes. And if that's the case, we would want to have the same kind of focused attention for every one of those nodes. And so, you know, we have a development authority that has the capability of doing this job, and there's nothing that precludes the city for doing a redevelopment plan for Old National, exclusive of creating another entity that we would need to either find staffing for, community residents to serve. That's double work and double effort. And I don't want the public to take that as the council's not committed to the redevelopment of Old National, because I think we've shown that with our whole conversation about Main Street that we had earlier today during our budget deliberations. So it seems like we're creating, you know, making this way more complicated than it needs to be. I don't see anything that would preclude you from moving forward on this project if you wanted to, you know, exercise and put another option to begin to work with the development authority that's currently in place.
Okay. Are you finished, Ms. Rao?
For now.
Okay, Mr. Baker?
Yes, thanks for recognizing me, Chair. I just wanted to add something really, really small, because I want to make sure that we're not sending the wrong message to our citizens in the city. I think Councilwoman Rao, she touched on it, but we can't be a contradiction. It seems as if what Mr. Wall explained, what our city attorney explained, and what the gentleman who was presenting explained, as well as Councilman Khalid, quite thoroughly explained that this is something else that would allow citizens to be involved and us having an opportunity to say what should come to the city, what we want, and before we move forward, get it right. Now, I understand that everybody is deeply concerned about our respective districts. However, we only have 2 established or somewhat established in this unincorporated area that we have business corridors. One of them we don't even own, Fulton Industrial, the majority of the business aspects of it. And the other one is Old National. Now, when we say we're not trying to stop the advancement and we're thinking about equity, I think we should really take a really deep dive into what we were dealing with on the phone or in this Zoom meeting earlier today. We're talking about raising the millage rates. And we're talking about bringing more economic development in this conversation to our city's probably most viable business corridor that's already established. 80% of our tax rates that we're considering, our taxes comes from our residents. Only 20% come from businesses. So it seems like this would be an asset. We've already published that we may be, we have a proposed hike in the millage rate. I don't see why any of my colleagues, even if there are 2 who are vocally against it, I think this should, just be taken as what has been said, let it breathe for a while, and then understand what we're doing to our residents, and not let our emotions trump what progress could look like in our city. Are you?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baker. Ms. Gums, you're up next.
I can't get in.
So I've listened to both my colleagues, Councilman Khalid and then also Councilman Baker, for quite some time. There's a concern, and Councilwoman Rao, Dr. Rao, hit a lot of my points directly, which was the concept of equity. Of course, you know, we've supported a lot of things happening on Old National, the Main Street development, the new public safety building, all of the things that will revitalize Old National. However, in an aspect as well, there are still districts that are left behind. And the majority of the taxpayers are in this area. So what I'm saying to you is that we have to start looking at equity. We have to start being fair, because I've watched some of the DA meetings, and a lot of them don't talk about bringing businesses into the other side of the city. It is all about Old National. And there are opportunities that are across our city, period. And I just think that we need to be very fair. We need to start looking at trying to figure out how we can all work together and stop. I'm not trying to halt Old National at all, because I'm one of the biggest supporters. But again, there are other parts of our city that need economic development as well. So that's all I have to say at this point.
Mr. Mayor, can I
Okay,
say
hold
something?
on, Ms. Gilliard, Ms. Gilliard, I'm about to recognize you.
Oh, okay.
Right, come, you're next, Ms. Gilliard. Go ahead and speak.
I'm just having a problem because I can't get back to Novus.
I got you.
I've been having issues all day long.
Yeah, I got
I'm not the one to really talk about equity, because we could be here all night long as it relates to equity, and I really don't want to go there, because I know that I've won everybody out about it. And I know that that my district is all the way on the other end of the spectrum, because we have a totally different need. And one of those needs is not affordable housing and workforce development. I just need to continue to say that, since that was given to us, okay? Not that that's not needed in the city, it definitely is. But, you know, we need to be going and looking for rural money, because that's really where we are. That's what we're really all about. I've listened to everyone, and my big concern is that, and I was concerned initially when the Downtown Development Authority was first presented, and my issue was more about funding than anything else. But one of the biggest issues, I don't even know about the nodes that we have decided is going to be the development nodes. I don't know anything about it, because that's not in the strategic plan. That's not in the economic development strategic plan. I see us putting projects in different places, but I can't relate back to a plan as to why it is there, or any of it is there. And so that's a real problem for me. But if a development authority is all about an area that needs revitalization, and if that area is an area where we have more concentrated population than any other area, then it kind of makes sense to me. But what I want to ask is, what are the pluses and minuses? So I would like, if Mr. Malazi is around, I would like for Mr. Malazi to tell us what the pluses and minuses are financially. I would like for the attorney to tell us, Attorney Walker, to tell us what the pluses and minuses are legally. And I would like for Mr. Donald to tell us what the pluses and minuses are as it relates to whatever plan. So, Mr. Malazi, can you start first? Let's start with the money first.
So I'm here. I think on my side is we want to maximize inflow as much as we can. On financial side of it, I'm not on the where it is. I have talked to our financial advisor on number of times, and he has emphasized it doesn't really matter how many you may have. I have been in some communities where they have got two downtown development, DDA, where I had been a member. But you have the real downtown is here, but the other side is just for commercial side of it. But that's beyond our scope. As you have seen where we are going now with our personal, we need to step up on the personal properties because you have more fragile revenue that will fall through real estate because there are several things. People can lose job, mortgage, but business, one business can make a whole lot change. You have some communities where there's a big business. Once that business leaves, it opens up the entire city. So if we can have multiple incoming businesses for us, the better. To make up for the shortfall, which I think we're going to discuss in the executive session about what we just discussed. I have got something that I need us to discuss. So what Mr. Ed has said, I'm in line with him. Have just to define, and I think Councilwoman Gams, she said something to say, when you are bringing business, think about the distribution of the city. So for finance, for me, whatever means we can get in a personal property, I'm for that.
Who's next, Ms. Gilliard?
The attorney, the legal part.
Okay, go ahead. Madam Attorney, go ahead.
Attorney Walker?
You know, I'm sorry, I was speaking. I thought I'd unmuted myself. Yeah, so I'm not aware of any contiguous requirement, and I didn't want to interrupt anyone, so I was waiting for my turn to speak to tell you that. I think Mr. Pike may be confusing the contiguity requirement with tax allocation districts. Like, for example, if you create a tax allocation district, I know that has to be contiguous. So as far as designating the area, I would need to look at the code more thoroughly to see. I mean, I just searched the entire act and I put in the word contiguous and I didn't see anything. And I read the entire act while you were talking and I didn't see anything. So I would just need to look further. I don't want to tell you definitively there's not a contiguity requirement, but I don't think there is. Now I know you can't have more than one DDA. Like you can't create one DDA for districts, you know, 2 and 3, which are close together, and then another DDA for District 5. You can't do that. You can only have one downtown development authority. But I think any area that you designate as a central business district would qualify to have that central business district classification. Now, as far as what are the powers and the duties of downtown development authorities, they can bring and defend their own actions, which means that for a liability standpoint, if they're sued as an authority, and the suit is not a suit against the city. They can purchase and acquire land, they can dispose of real estate, they can finance as far as loans, grants, leasing, they can borrow money, they can execute revenue bonds, leases, trusts, other obligations. They can apply for state and federal grants, guarantees, loans, etc. So there's a list of things that, you know, they can do. I mean, if you want, I can send you a list by email. I mean, it's kind of exhaustive. So I guess it's more of a determination of does the city at this point even want to consider this a central business district?
Okay.
Mr. Donald?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to, let's see, am I muted or? Yeah, okay. So when it comes to economic development, I'm always going to defer to the expertise of our economic development director, so I definitely like him to chime in. But I think when you talk about advantages and disadvantages, it's more so what the preference of the council is and how you want to attack economic development. Using these development authorities, whether it's the South Fulton Development Authority that you've established, or if you establish a new DDA, has many advantages and different tools in your tool belt to attack economic development. But I think it's imperative for the council to really evaluate, where we are, 3 years in to our life cycle and how you want to attack economic development. And based on how you legislate those activities, we are ready and willing to implement your will and successfully deliver economic development services. As far as it goes to the expertise and validity, I would defer to Mr. Pike, who's on the call and can chime in accordingly.
Thank you. So I just wanted to say real quickly that there's not much difference from a downtown development authority and a development authority. In essence, they have the same legal authority with the respect of just very minute things. And so most of the things that you need a downtown development authority to do, your development authority can do. So I just wanted to put that out there just for clarity. I will say, just for the record, I have been the executive director of a downtown development authority. So I do have a lot of extensive experience with managing DDAs. So I'm very acutely aware of the laws that govern DDAs and the structure of them. And so I just wanted to make sure that, people understand and have all the information, they can make an informed decision. I've had conversations with Mr. Bullard. It's obviously their option, but this project can move forward. So I don't want them to think that if the DDA doesn't get established, we can't help them accomplish their goals and objectives in the city. We can certainly do that. And if it is the council's desire to create a central business district where you want to establish a DDA, we certainly will be there to assist and make sure that moves forward in a productive way. But I do want to say that DDAs are very specific boundary and they're not citywide. And so the issue that you want to have is you want to make sure in your future growth, you want to make sure that you encompass that in the DDA footprint as you make that decision. Because once that DDA, while you can adjust boundaries, once you establish debt in that DDA, so once that DDA issues bond, you can no longer move that DDA to another area. That wherever they issued that bond debt, that footprint is permanently set. So that's something that we have to make sure that we're also aware of as well. And secondly, we have plans, economic development plans, we have tax allocation district plans. Every single one of those plans speaks to Old National and making sure that there's investment in the Old National corridor. So I don't want it to seem like that those things aren't taking place, because they are definitely taking place on multiple levels. And so as it relates to creating jobs and creating more businesses, definitely we know there's a lot of work to be done in that area. And I think that definitely the DA Development Authority is a great tool to make that happen. And I'll answer any other questions you may have.
Okay, Ms. Gilliard, you have 2 more minutes.
Okay, I don't have any more questions, but the glaring thing to me is the whole planning of everything, not the DDA, but everything. I've been saying this for years now, because we do a little bit over here, we do a little bit over there, a little bit over there, and somebody wants it up here and up there, and then other places they just get left out, and it seems like there is no plan. It's just let's and it's just I think that it's sad that we get to the point where another section comes up with something that is viable and something that could work where they want it, but yet in all of those places where all the other stuff is going on, it's like, well, we shouldn't have it now. So I'm really conflicted by it being that way, by it being, and the person that's talking is the person that's got nothing, okay? But I'm concerned about the whole. And until we start looking at our resources and what we have in each section, that is so much like day and night in some areas. I don't see how we come up with a plan until we really get someplace in a room and talk about, well, these are the pluses and minuses in all of these different areas, and how do we plan for these different areas instead of acting like we are when we actually are not.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Gilliard.
I'm confused.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gilliard. Ms. Willis, you're in the queue.
Yes, I just want to make sure that we don't send the wrong message, that we don't support the Old National Corridor. The Old National Corridor has Collab South, where they're going to get the incubator there. The Old National Corridor has a new public safety center that's going to go there. The Old National Center right now under construction is Habitat for Humanities. The Old National Corridor has the Main Street program that's going to go there. And so I think when it comes to the Old National Corridor, although this is a project being done in the Development Authority, was yielded over $300,000. Well, it was yielded over $300,000 worth of parkland, so the Development Authority can work on a mixed-use project there. So to send at these areas to make sure that we are developing in those areas as well. And our economic development plan that we paid $80,000 for, it did identify all the nodes throughout the city. And
no, it didn't.
Look at our plans, and we need to act according to our plans to stop this piecemealing and this divisive way of going forth with economic development projects in our city.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Willis. Mr. Khalid, and I'll have one question.
Okay, I won't belabor the point. I think we're headed into the debate section of this, and hopefully this will be on the agenda for us to vote on August 25th, and we can have the debate there. But I do just want to address a couple of concerns. And so one of them was about funding our development authorities. I think that we're not funding them. I think that we're making investments in them. I think what we've all learned from our economic development trips is that development authorities, after some initial investment, generate huge tax revenues for their cities. And so I think that that's worthwhile, especially with the situation that we're in now. We did create a large, to address Mr. Pike's concern, we did create a large footprint for the Development Authority. We actually made it as large as legally possible because we know that it does become fixed once we start doing bond issuances. And so there are a couple of there are a couple of things that prevent the authority from moving different places. You can include, you're not supposed to include residential properties or churches or things like that. So those things have not been included. I want to talk for a minute just about equity. First of all, I appreciate all of the attention that's being paid to Old National, and I want to thank all of my council members, and I think all of the residents on Old National appreciate it as well, because we did not have any attention paid to us for decades. We haven't had any new centers or art centers or parks, or we haven't had that development in decades. We're still trying to get sidewalks done, and we do have issues with crime. And so I think one of the reasons that Old National is getting so much attention is because it needs so much attention. But I do believe that one of the things that creating this South Perimeter Development Authority does is actually create equity. It actually frees up our citywide development authority to work on projects, other projects throughout the city. I know that we've had some talk about a town center and creating that somewhere off of South Fulton. I do just want to highlight in the actual legislation for the DDA at the very top, we talk about how the primary goal is not to locate city hall or government buildings which do not pay property taxes to Old National Highway, but to like revitalize this corridor for the enhancement of commercial revenues. So I am 100% committed to a city hall and a city center somewhere other than Old National. I think that our citywide development authority should lead on that and should be working on projects around the city, and that this allows that work to continue around the city while we don't lose focus on Old National. Councilman Willis talked about a special tax district, and that is actually one of the particular powers that a DDA has that a development authority does not have. And so again, as we're talking about raising millage rates for our residents who make up 40%, you know, their taxes, their sales taxes and their property taxes make up 60% of our revenue. I want to see us generate that revenue not off the back of residents, but off of businesses. And so with that, I'll close. I look forward to us hopefully being able to pass this August 25th. The last thing that I will just say, just to underline, so these projects, and this is very important, these projects can go forward without the DDA. As we are going to see in our August 25th zoning hearing, people are going forward building projects all of the time without the input of residents and citizens. But I don't think that that's the city that we want. This DDA allows 7 members of the community, 5 of whom live or own businesses on Old National, to have input into what goes on Old National. When this was brought by the first time, all of the parcels had been secured and we were ready to go forward. And so each time, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that we built any new senior housing since we become a city. And each time we delay this vote, we delay the building. There's a developer who's ready to start building senior houses next year. And so each time we delay this vote and we don't move forward, we're actually delaying the building of housing for seniors in South Fulton.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Khalid. Let me just say a few things and to correct you, Mr. Khalid. They're building senior housing in District 1 as we speak right now. And to take a little bit of issue with the statement of no attention to Old National for decades. Those of us who have been around Old National, who've been a part of the Old National Merchants Association when you were a little kid, we're the ones who brought in what we brought in today to make Old National better than what it used to be, but not what it should be today. So I don't want you to spit on the graves of nobody by saying that no attention was given for deals. Now, the other thing I would like to say is, you know, we have no harmony when it comes to efforts for economic development. We have no harmony. Everybody's trying to outdo the other person to get something done and put it in their name. And Ms. Gilliard, you're right. And you know, some of this attention could be paid, could be someplace else. I got paperwork on my desk about this issue, and everything says Development Authority of, it says Downtown Development Authority. Mr. Bullock. Mr. Bullock. Mr. Bullock, are you there?
Yes, sir. Sorry, I was having a hard time getting mute off.
Are you there now?
Yes, sir.
Do you know I also represent District 5, 6, and 7?
Yes, sir. As mayor, absolutely.
Have you talked with me?
Well, we haven't had a chance to bring
Yes,
it up.
that's a yes or no. Have you
It's
talked
a
with
no. No, sir, not yet.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you very much. Now, let me tell you something else. I'm looking at someone said something about, it might have been Mr. Bullock, about this takes all of the pressure off the city and we can vet it through them. And well, I want citizens to make decisions for our city. I look at a document that I was given. I don't know whether this document is old or new, but it's about this issue. And it has a committee on here with Mr. Khalid and others, and specifies terms of office. I want our citizens who live in that area, who has been there for 50, 60, 70 years, to be a valuable resource for what we'd like to see on that corridor. If you're going to have a committee, who gives anybody the authority to choose who they want on the committee? That's not good for me. And Ed Wall, I've known you for 100 years, and you gave a traditional Ed Wall answer.
What's that? What's that, Mayor?
You gave a traditional Ed Wall answer to the question, and we'll talk about it later. But
yes, sir.
You and I have had these conversations about downtown development authorities and main streets. You and I have had conversations even beyond what we do in the city. So here's the deal.
Sir, we have.
All right, I know we have. Here's the deal. The Development Authority, Main Street, South Perimeter Development Authority, the Community Development of the city, land use plans. Everybody stepping on everybody. Why don't we find something that's going to work before we move any forward? If this will not hurt, and the developer can get what he wants without having this, why are we rushing into all of this stuff? When we have the tools, Mr. Pike just said, we have the tools to make it work. It's too much for me. It really, really is. And I think that's where we need to come to some kind of agreement or collaboration. And then Ms. Gilliard, I think once we do that, maybe some of this effort that we're putting with all this stuff in one area can now switch over to District 4. Maybe it can. But we have people, man, we got folks out here ain't got no jobs. We got folks out here about to be evicted from their home. We got folks out here we've been feeding on the feed and everything. We don't have time. Let's see what the Development Authority is going to do. Let's see what the Main Street is going to do before we pile on and pile on and pile on. And I mean, it just amazes me how we get into all this stuff. And if we do this stuff, I'm gonna tell you, whatever committee comes up before me, or there's a question, I'm gonna ask one thing: where is the community? The people who pay the taxes, who should have the decision and what's to go on in their community. We started this thing off, and I say it again. We started this conversation off as if we was in a meeting trying to approve his project. And no respect to Mr. Bullock, I don't care at this point in time. I don't care about your project. But that's what this meeting kind of started off as. So it's never about what Mr. Bullock can do as a project to bring to us. It's about what the people in the Old National community want to see. And he'll have to play in line with that. And lastly, let me say this. Before we do all this stuff, and I keep saying this, I'm gonna say it again. You better be working on the infrastructure to get you where you want to be.
For real.
Ms. Gilliard said it today. We talking to Chet Hill about the sewer. No infrastructure. You better get an infrastructure. Always have to be sewer. It could be policies, it could be procedures, it could be a lot of things. But make sure that your infrastructure is there before you engage in all these conversations. And we have senior committees out here that deal with zoning. We got other folks that deal with zoning. They have to be a part. And lastly, I'm gonna say this, and I'm quit. I have a big problem when the man that we have chose to have economic development in our city is not getting the respect and then not using expertise. This man has been written up in magazines just this year, but he's not getting the respect and the experience to put in his input to do things. And I'll tell you what, that's got to stop. That's all I have to say. And Madam Clerk, you can call the next item.
The next item on the agenda is council discussion on joint representation and cost sharing agreement. Mr. Mayor.
Okay, let me just bring you up to date. The South Fulton mayors met to talk about the amount of money that was given us for the CARES Act. Are you with me? And of course, you know that Fulton County got $104 million in CARES Act relief fund. Of that 104 million, 2.5 million was given down to the cities. The problem we as mayors in South Fulton had was that when you take that 2.5 million and you divide it up between 14 cities in Fulton County, that's a very small piece. Then learning that other municipalities, other councils or other commissions have given up as much as 30% of their money to the cities. When we talk to the city, to the county, they say, well, the money was given to us and we don't have to give you anything. Well, here's the fallacy in that. The money was given by the federal government to the state because of population. Well, guess who was a part of that population? All of the 14 cities in Fulton County. We made up that population that decided to get them the money that they needed. So it started with the 8 mayors in South Fulton, and now it's grown to the 14 mayors in this county. And I can tell you, it's not very often that 14 mayors in Fulton County can agree about anything. But seemingly, a lot of them are agreeing about this. I hope that you all have a copy of
Mayor.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been while you've been talking, I just don't want you to give too much information to.
Okay, I was gonna call on you in a few minutes anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what this is about. Everybody is signed up except us. I cannot go ahead and fix anything because there's money associated with it. And Madam Attorney, did you want to say something?
Yes, Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I had a little logistics issue, but yes, I did vet the agreement, and I think that it will be a cost-effective way to resolve the issues with the funding. If there are specifics, because this would potentially involve legal, then I would say if there are specific questions, then you may want to reserve that for executive session.
I do. That is correct. I hope everybody has gotten and had opportunity to peruse it, and we can have questions in the executive session. Okay. All right. Seeing nobody in the queue, Madam Clerk.
Our next item is council discussion on public safety activities, city manager, police and fire chief.
Let me say this before we get to the city manager. You know, I have been, when I started running for mayor, one of my strong points was the fact that I believed in public safety. And I want to tell you that one of the things commitments that I made was to have precincts in every district. I think with one district we don't have it right now is Helen's district, and we're about to close on that, which will fulfill our commitment to have those precincts. And this police department has done so much dedicated work and has done it without controversy. And I just want to praise them for what they've done. and let the people know from the policeman's mouth and the chief's mouth and the fire chief, just how magnificent they have been over the years. And I just want to say that, Mr. Donald, before you start.
Yes, sir. Well, I'll tell you, we've got interim Chief Sterling as well as Chief Meadows here, and we have a presentation. I'm not certain if Miss Chris is going to manage it or if it's the clerk's office. It looks like Miss Chris. So she's sharing her screen. We'll go through this presentation very quickly. But, I think Chief Meadows just finished his second year. We are working to have a public safety center come online here soon, and the council has made some very strong investments in the public safety, even without a lot of available resources as we really build the plane as we fly it. And so I thought it appropriate to really highlight the investments that the council has made, and then the results for our citizens, noting that we do have quite a ways to go. And so you could go to the next slide just to kind of level set. Now, I think for the council, you guys are very aware that the city of South Fulton public safety ecosphere includes municipal courts, but you just received an update from them. And so we really wanted to just focus on the two areas where you haven't, especially as you look to allocate resources during the budget. And so not very long ago, it was actually, I think on my fifth day here, we transitioned our police department, not having a chief or really anybody to negotiate on behalf of the city, and in competition with Fulton County, who decided to continue to stand up a police force despite not having anything other than the unincorporated area, that small 6.5 mile stretch. So when they transitioned in March of 2018, it's just a reminder that we had less than 70 sworn officers to establish the department. And we transferred an array of vehicles. I think some of them, like the Crown Victorias, are not even in production. And I'm not sure how easy it is to get parts when you've got a fleet, that old. We had no facilities for our police. I think fire was in a similar predicament. While we did transition a fire chief and fire personnel, we were, kind of lacking when it comes down to having the appropriate number of firefighters, which we're still kind of working towards even now. We had 10 fire stations, but it also has to be noted that, our fire personnel, 2 of those don't even belong to us, which is why the council has been adamant. I think you heard from Councilmember Gumbs advocating earlier today for a fire station in District 2. I think Councilmember Gilliard has been extremely vocal about the need to extend services and improve facilities in her district. Councilmember Willis, I can go on and on. I think each one of you have really talked about that need and what we inherited, and making sure that you invest on behalf of the people. And so in addition to that, just highlighting that the tools and equipment that we received were not only old, less than adequate, and the worst of what remained, we also were missing through the negotiations. It was not as friendly as it likely could have been. And in the point of police, while we are extremely thankful for the leadership that former interim Chief Rogers provided for us, I think we didn't have, a chief with the experience necessary to transition us. So there were a ton of challenges. And so, Ms. Chris, you can go to the next slide. And so, these, again, just highlighting those things. You had no police chief, you had competing department with Fulton County, and we had not, identified our financial structure yet. You had an IGA, which they mainly controlled. Those discrepancies in tools and equipment, lack of adequate staffing, and then none of those, all of those precincts or areas in which they operated didn't come, and some of the best equipment from those multi-jurisdictional partnerships didn't come over either, which was also a challenge and something that was made, into a very big deal. And so early on, we had those extremely high response times because we didn't have enough people to really complete those beats, which I think Chief said hadn't been redesigned since the 70s. And so they were a ton of issues there. Same thing with fire. I think, there's some really big investments that I'll let the chiefs kind of chime in on to highlight your investments into making sure fire has the tools and equipment needed, but we didn't even have the appropriate turnout gear. There were no mutual aid agreements, which you guys talked about today. To the council's credit, we've got 3 already existing and 6 going through the pipeline that'll be coming before you soon. But that didn't even exist at the time. And then, of course, the IGAs and all of those things were kind of tough. And so, Ms. Chris, if you go to the next slide, but since that time, and I give ultimate credit to mayor and council, because I think you have made a true commitment to ensure that the promises you made prior to, truly the true establishment of the city when you were just running and having the vision for our city has really turned into setting a foundation for world-class public safety. We're not there yet. Ain't no way we're gonna lie about it or try to convince people otherwise. But what we have done in an extremely short period of time, because remember, at the establishment of the city, these departments were not here. And truthfully, you inherited a mess. You had great people, but the tools, equipment, and the resources they needed to be great did not come with them. And so in your leadership, you've since invested about $20 million in public safety activities. We've had some of these innovative activities recognized not only across the region, but, the state and in some instances nationally. Chief Meadows is recognized as one of the best, investigators in the country. And I'll, talk about that as we introduce him. But we've introduced piloting the police form body cameras, where we've taken all of the restrictions off, where other jurisdictions still allow officers to turn them on and off. He's removed that and instituted a pilot that makes us one of the most transparent and responsive police forces in the state of Georgia. You established the 3 new mini precincts and utilized additional existing facilities to increase police presence. Some of those are partnerships with our small businesses, adding additional support to them as they try to stand themselves up. You redesigned the police beats, which, under previous leadership hadn't been done since the 70s, which, really impacts the services that our residents were getting. You've dramatically reduced the response times. Although they're still nowhere near where we want them to be, they are much more responsive than prior to transition. You've also added 65 police vehicles. Now, we still have 1 or 2 of those Crown Vics floating around, but we pretty much upgraded our fleet. And through the URA, you've invested in making sure we bring all of those folks into, modern times. And so we're eliminating throwback cars. And you've also increased technology to where we know where all our vehicles are, how they respond, the time in which they do, and how they resolve them. And while I won't talk about how many sworn we have just for their safety, what has been clear is we've doubled the total number of police officers that are patrolling our city, not just sworn, but even the administrative support that they didn't have, they now have now. In fire, we celebrated our first push-in ceremony that we were super excited about. We've got 3 new fire apparatuses to the tune of about $4 million of your investment there. You've tripled, and I'm sorry, that sworn police officers is a duplication, but the mutual aid agreements we've already harped on, but you've got key municipalities on our border signing up, and that's how we've been really able to assist them as they have had some struggles responding to coronavirus. I think that's important because now we're actually providing services to the city of Atlanta, which is much bigger than we are, as well as to Fulton County, servicing their facilities as well. So that really highlights the big step up in our service delivery and the great efforts from our fire personnel. Not only that, we were expecting and kind of warning people that the ISO rating would increase to 4, but instead we've maintained it at 3 and made great strides in moving that forward. and you've got the launch of the smoke detector program. And independent of Fulton County, we acquired the SAFER grant. So that's just, I mean, it's a great story of how we have started to lay the foundation. I think what gets lost often is that, you know, you guys are such visionary leaders, and to be honest, our citizens, you're a reflection of them. I think I've heard Councilmember Khalid say that all the time, and so they too are visionaries. That's the whole reason we have a city, and so we want everything right now. And to be honest, that's a part of our challenge, but it's a great challenge and opportunity because we've been able to do this thing and move this thing forward so quickly because the hunger, the desire, and the political will is there. And so I thought it was important to kind of highlight some of those things and then really recognize these two current leaders that we have that are committed not only to their staff, but also carrying out your vision. And so first up is Chief Keith Meadows, who, you know, I think is, to me, the best chief in the region. And it's been well recognized by Noble and about anybody else that's given out awards that, you know, he is one, the best at solving crimes in the country. We've had the FBI, the U.S. Marshals. I've received just this month 5 letters of accommodation about the work he's done both in the region, but specifically in support of our city for solving violent crimes, eradicating drug sales and things of that nature, and really cleaning up not only the city, but the region. And so excited to have him, and probably more excited that even in his selection and acquisition, as we stole him away from a neighboring jurisdiction, you know, there was a unanimous agreement and will from the council that this was your guy. And I think he's paid great dividends, and you've made a great decision. And so with that, I will introduce Chief Meadows so that he can highlight you know, what types of activities have occurred within the police force during his tenure.
Well, thank you, Mr. Donald, for that introduction and those kind words. I really wanted to thank the body for your commitment to public safety. If you had asked me 2 years ago if this police department would be in the position that it's in today, I would have never thought it possible. But because of your commitment and your willingness to work with the police department and understanding that we are a young agency and growing, that it would be important for us to not only have buy-in from the community, but having your support as well. One of the things I did when I first came here was I sat down and I met with each one of you individually, and I kind of pitched my ideas about the police department, and I wanted to ground everything in the 21st century principles. And I listened to your ideas. We've adopted and we've integrated a lot of those ideas into the police department, but I think it was really important to have that sort of buy-in from the council. And so if you look at our mission statement, it's really reflective of the organization that we put together today. We want to continue to grow this organization. And I think I said it early on that we wanted to grow this organization organically because as we began to expand, we didn't want to be married to anything that was in Fulton County or any antiquated practices in law enforcement from the past. And so we wanted to be very forward thinking in our approach to this. And I believe that's what we are as an organization today. You can go on to the next slide. So working together and building this police department, making sure that our citizens have input. I just had a really long conversation with one of our community activists today, Marcus Coleman, and we had long discussion about police policy and the direction of the police department and how important it would be for us to be able to sit down and work with our community to develop forward-thinking policy and making sure that we were on the cutting edge of technology and things of that nature. Not only that, we've also looked at our partnerships. You heard Mr. Donald just mention the U.S. Marshals, the FBI, the DEA, and a lot of the federal agencies. Today, they just did a press conference on an $8 million drug bust where they seized about $8 million worth of heroin. Well, that investigation actually started right here in the city of South Fulton about 2 years ago. And so being able to work with our partners, create those force multipliers is extremely important for us as a police department. We believe that we've created some really strong partnerships, not just with law enforcement agencies, but within our communities and with our elected body as well. You can go on to the next slide. So Mr. Donald mentioned earlier that we started out with only with less than 70 police officers when we first came over. And that's true. We put in a really aggressive recruitment and retention program. And to this day, our sworn population has swelled to 154. This has a great deal to do with you all allowing us to increase our starting salaries to $52,000 a year. One of the things we wanted to do was make sure we had a mixture of brand new police officers coming in and veteran police officers that were coming in from other agencies, because what that does for us, it brings them in, yes, at a lower salary, but there's also a commitment from them for the newer police officers coming in to be with us for 2 to 3 years because the state law mandates it. And so we've had very little turnover. I think, and Ms. Henderson mentioned that the other day. We haven't lost any police officers to another agency this year at all. And so I'm really proud of that. We have a workforce that's very diverse, and it's certainly reflective of our community. We're the largest African-American city in the country. And I think that's something that bodes us well. And if you look at the breakdown here, you see that 73% of our police officers are African-American. We have a 38% female rate here, and we'd like to see that number a little closer to 40%. And so continuing to build a police department that's reflective of our communities is going to be really important to us. You can move on to the next slide. And here is a prime example of that. If you look at our command structure, you'll see we have 3 females and 3 males. And sometimes I have to say it is that the women, they tend to outshine us sometime. When I first came in, I said that we weren't going to pick people based on favorites or who does the best job of kissing up. We're looking for leaders. And these are the people that actually rose to the top of the organization. And I know that each one of you have had the opportunity to sit down and interact with them. We're looking at building out that 4th and final structure of the police department. When I first came, the only structure that we had in the police department, we had a patrol and a few detectives, and that was it. Well, now we have 3 different divisions. We're looking to add our 4th and final division. And this is what the command structure will look like within the organization. We have our patrol, we have our special operations division, which includes all of our proactive patrol units. We have our criminal investigations division, and then we'll have our Office of Professional Standards. You can move on to the next slide. I'm not going to go over this slide. This is just a breakdown of the org chart that shows the 4 different divisions within the police department. You can move on. So the field operations division, which is our patrol function, we've actually had a great deal of success there. Our TASER program was implemented. We're always looking for less lethal force options to use, not just having them, but also making sure that we have the appropriate policies behind the use of those less lethal force options. I've gone through several different iterations of our use of force policy. I actually took off for a week and I did nothing but rewrite policy. And so we're very proud of that TASER program. And then we also looking at our body camera program also. I looked at different body camera policies throughout the country, and I kind of settled in on a couple of states where the state attorney general actually develops policy for the entire state, police policy for the entire state. And I looked at their body camera policy and I kind of tweaked it in a number of different areas. But right now we have several different triggers on our body cameras where if a police officer pulls his weapon out of his holster, his body camera automatically starts recording. If he pulls his TASER out of his holster, his body camera automatically starts recording. If the officer gets within a half mile of his E9 or his or her E911 call, his or her body camera starts automatically recording. Our compliance rate with respects to our body camera protocols is much higher than the region. Nationally, the compliance rate for body cameras is only 30%. And if you're going to invest that much money in a technology, getting that sort of compliance rates it's not a good thing. And so I'm really proud of our compliance rate, which hovers somewhere around 70%. And we have a really aggressive disciplinary protocol in place to help deal with those repeat offenders that repeatedly forget to turn on their body cameras. Crime reduction is another one. I wish I could say that we've done this all on our own. But as you heard me mention earlier, having the right partnerships in place, and we strategically picked our partners to make sure that we can deliberately drive crime down. And what I mean by that, when in all of the years that I spent in solving violent crime in other jurisdictions, the one thing that I found to be true is that 80% of overall murders and aggravated assaults and robberies are typically drug or gang related. And so it's important for us to have those force multipliers around those issues. We've created a really strong partnership with the DEA, which helps us. So far, we've been able to seize $2.2 million in drug assets. We've done well over 130 search warrants, only no knock warrants. I know that we've discussed that before, but we've also come up with protocols that are helping our police officers to adopt a more aggressive mindset when it comes to identifying these problem areas where we know violent crimes are being perpetrated and also where drugs are being sold. And so we're constantly looking at those, and we're constantly looking at and reevaluating our partnerships. ATF just gave us a bomb dog. One of our officers is in Virginia at Quantico right now training with that bomb dog. That bomb dog will be, yes, he'll be able to sniff out bombs, but he'll also be able to find ballistic evidence like shell casings, weapons, and things of that nature, which also goes toward our ability to identify violent areas and help to reduce those violent offenses also. So we're really happy about that bomb dog, because those, as you all well know, to purchase those dogs and the training is very expensive, but the federal government is actually footing the bill for this particular K9. We've opened up 3 new precincts in the past 2 years, the Butner Road precinct, which right now is housing our community policing section, the Cascade precinct, which is where a lot of the command structure is located. My office is there. And then we have our background and recruitment and our administrative functions at the Cedar Grove precinct. Now, my plan is, as we begin to grow the police department, to put patrol units in those precincts and centralize all of these administrative functions. We'll have a lieutenant over each one of the precincts. They'll have so many patrol officers that will be dispatched from there. We'll have so many proactive patrols in terms of traffic units and things of that nature that will be housed there as well. We're not where we want to be, but we're certainly headed in the right direction. Mr. Donald mentioned the beat redesign, and we've kind of beaten that drum to death. I'm not going to go into it a great deal. I think I do have a slide a little bit later on where I did want to touch on some points, but you can go on to the next slide. Okay, so the patrol function, these are our E911 calls. And I want to highlight one thing in particular. We have 11,741 average false alarm calls every year. The body created one piece of legislation, and that was the false alarm ordinance. Right now, I believe the city attorney is finalizing the language in that contract that we're expecting to go with Cry Wolf on. They're going to help us. I spoke with Ken DeSimone, the police chief up in Sandy Springs. He's a very good friend. He said after they put this program in place, they were able to reduce their 911 calls around false alarms by almost 76%. What that means for us, and you see we had 11,741 false alarm calls on an average for the past 2 years. That's going to be almost 10,000 fewer E911 calls with that one piece of legislation. And that's really significant because that's 10% of our overall call volume. And then you see next our domestic calls, which is around 9,800 calls. And one of the things that we're looking at doing right now in an effort to get those numbers down, we're training our police officers more in domestic crisis intervention so that we could start to not just going to E911 calls where domestic calls come up and arresting people, but trying to solve those repeat 911 calls that are coming in so that we can start to drive those numbers down. I don't think we'll be able to arrest our way out of that problem. And so certainly, even with the pandemic, we've noticed a rise in those, but we want to make sure that we're kind of on the cutting edge of the training piece of that, so that we can continue to drive those numbers down, so that we can reduce the number of calls for service that we're getting around domestic violence. Next slide. This is the beat realignment. As you all see in that second diagram up at the top, we're still the time that we're spending on E911 calls per shift has gone down a little, not significantly, because right now we've been able to staff up to 10 beats. And if you look at that first diagram, at the 10 beat at the very bottom, and you go up to the top, you'll see the 10 beat is still almost at the apex or at the very top of that scale. Our goal is and will have to be to continue to drive that number down, so that we're somewhere in the neighborhood of a third of our police officers' times being spent on E911 calls. Next slide. The accomplishments within the Criminal Investigation Division. I'm so proud of them. Every murder that we've had so far this year, which is 10, every single one of them are solved. And we're in the process right now of putting additional protocols in place for some of our more complex crimes, so that we can make sure that we continue to drive our solve rate with other crimes even higher. But the Bulletproof Vest Award is one accomplishment. We had the Project Safe Neighborhood Grant. We established the License and Permits Unit, which is where most of our alcohol permits are going through. We established the Crime Analysis Unit, where you all are getting those really robust crime analysis reports every week. It shows the direction of our crime numbers, and we're going to continue to build on those numbers as we move forward. Among other accomplishments that the Criminal Investigations Division has done, we're really proud of them. They've come a long way, and our crime scene supervisor, Helen Weathers, she's fastly becoming recognized throughout the region as potentially one of the best forensic crime scene people in the state. She's done a magnificent job. In fact, with ATF, she's working with them right now. We've been able to match about 38 or 39 shell casings to different shooting incidences that have happened throughout the region, not just in the city of South Fulton, but throughout the region. Next slide. These are our crime numbers. And as you can see, they've consistently gone down over the years, but we're almost 2/3 of the way through this year, and we haven't even reached last year's or 2018's halfway point. I feel really good about the numbers. You'll see that we have an overall reduction of 20% in crimes against persons. Those are usually violent crimes, and that's over that 2-year period. For that same 2-year period, we have a 21% decrease in property crimes. If you look down at larceny from autos, when I first came, the mayor and I did a public service announcement where that was the largest crime number in the whole city. We had 1,318 crimes in 2018. That number went down slightly in 2019. No, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong, it went down tremendously in 2019 to 924. And so far this year, 2/3 of the way through, we're only at 344 cars that have been broken into this year. That's a huge overall reduction in larceny from vehicles. Now, I will tell you this, the pandemic certainly played a huge part in the lower numbers earlier this year. But even as the economy began to ramp up, we're not seeing a dramatic increase in those numbers as we move forward. You can go on to the next slide. The Special Operations Division, we were able to establish the gang unit, the park ranger unit, establish the narcotics and access forfeiture unit, K9 unit, our traffic unit. I know that many of you call me consistently about the tractor trailers coming through the various communities. And that's one of the things I really wanted to talk about. When I first came, I was hearing a lot about the violent crimes, the shootings and things of that nature. Lately, really, and you all have been getting the same complaints, there's more quality of life complaints that we're getting. And it's been about the tractor trailers, it's about the ATVs, it's about the loud noises and things of that nature, which is a much better problem to have. than violent crime, but certainly when you have an aging population like we have in certain areas of the city, quality of life means just as much to them as not being the victim of a violent crime. And because most aging population is not going to put themselves in a position to be a victim of a violent crime. And so we have to make sure that we're starting to balance that a little bit more. As we began to ramp up with more people, we want to make sure that we're deploying more resources to help deal with those quality of life issues. And as the city begins to invest more in quality of life infrastructure, we'll start to see that get better as well. That's been my experience anyway. Next slide. These are quite a few of the drug busts that we've made over the course of 2 years. And this is really just a small sample of the number of guns that we've taken off the street. And this is one of the things that I'm most proud about, are the number of weapons that we've been targeting and getting off the streets with respect to gang activity. And I firmly believe that's one of the reasons it's translated into fewer violent crimes occurring within the city. Next slide. The Office of Professional Standards was responsible for rolling out the body camera program. They're also running our social media campaigns. We just spoke with Gary Lefwich. We're going to be rolling out a really aggressive PSA program where we're going to try to develop a PSA every month. That's one of the things that we'll be funding from our drug funds, to try to get messages out to our citizens and try to educate them on our crime patterns and trends as we're seeing them, among other things that are occurring in the city. Next slide. So many of you have called me about the 8 Can't Wait initiative that's taking place throughout the country. And I think what's important for us to highlight is that the city of South Fulton was already doing a majority of these already. We never engaged in chokeholds or strangleholds or neck restraints. We always required de-escalation. Every one of our police officers, they're required to go through domestic violence training every year. They're required to go through de-escalation training, among deadly force training as well. Warning before shooting. I think we all understand that's really going to be determined by the circumstances. We don't expect anybody to give a warning if somebody's already shooting at them. Certainly the circumstances will dictate that. And we want to exhaust all alternatives before shooting. To me, that and the use of force continuum are very much similar in that you're looking at other ways to resolve the force that's being levied against the police officer or another person. And I think it's important to understand that we always look for those. And the use of force continuum is actually, most people think it's a policy, it's actually a training tool that you go through where you're teaching your police officers how to use come-alongs, which are pressure points, or you're trying to use a verbal judo where you're trying to de-escalate a situation before it gets to a point to where deadly force is even necessary. And so those are the sort of things that we're putting our police officers through regularly to try to keep us away from those sort of scenarios. And as you can imagine, we've been successful in doing that. We never were able to shoot at moving vehicles, and the comprehensive reporting of our use of force. Right now, the way we do it is that every use of force incident, you pull your weapon out, the use of force report has to be done. And how we know our system of checks and balances is that if that police officer pulled their weapon out of that holster, the body camera started recording, and then we instantly know at that point that we should have a use of force report. That use of force report goes before our internal use of force board. They look at them, they look at the officer's past history to determine if that officer has a pattern, a discernible pattern of behavior associated with their regular use of force. And then we look for training needs or possibly disciplinary action that may be coming on the heels of their use of force or misuse of force. So we have systems of checks and balances established within the police department. All of that's done through the Office of Professional Standards. And I think that's it for me. Is there another slide? Mr. Donald, am I taking questions now, or are we just going to go directly into?
I'm sorry, Chief, I was muted. We're actually going to go to fire. And so next we have Chief Sterling Jones. His presentation is slightly shorter, but just kind of highlighting, you know, Chief Sterling or Chief Jones came to us and joined us as a deputy chief and has been kind of thrust into the interim role. We're beyond excited to have him join our team and thankful for also Deputy Chief Lay. They both came in as deputies looking to serve under what was the Fire Chief of the Year in the state of Georgia, which is a great accomplishment for the city of South Fulton to have that leader at our helm, who's since been kind of snatched up by GMA delivering that statewide service. But they have been working very diligently, both with the Fire Association to make sure that we understand the needs of our fire personnel and staff who are kind of coordinating this great service on our behalf, but also to carry on the innovation and the vision of the council. And so Chief Jones will provide some insights on just what they're doing, what type of resources they need, and kind of what's next for us. And so Chief Jones.
Before Chief Jones gets there, Miss Willis did pop up on my queue. Miss Willis, you want to go ahead?
Well, Mayor, it's probably going to be more effective if you let them close out the presentation. That way, if you got fire and or police questions, I would.
Well, actually, I have a question concerning police.
Do you want? Would you be all right? We gonna go through both of them. Then you can come back to your question, Ms. Willis.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chief Jones. Go right ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Thank you for allowing me a few seconds to kind of talk about what we do. I want to echo Chief Meadows' sentiment as far as being appreciative of your commitment to public safety, and I'll include myself in that arena. The fire department, as you say, police and fire, we're the face of you as we go out and perform our duties, because when you go back and they look at the good and bad things we do as a department, we're a representation of you and the citizens of the city of South Fulton. So as you go back and look through, like I said, I'm just going to do another introduction. I am Sterling Jones, and I want to say I've been here 6 months now, and been in this position for currently 4 months as your interim fire chief. I was brought in to work with Chief Broom, and Chief Lay came in a little bit after me, but I was very surprised when Chief Broom moved on to other things. So my focus had to shift and kind of go in a different direction. But I was definitely appreciative that Chief Broom laid some great foundation, and I was able to kind of take the step in and kind of ride that initiatives what he had started, and kind of be fortunate enough to move into a few of my own. And so as we go into our slide, you can kind of look at our motto, and those are just not words for us. I think if you look at the women and men of the city of South Fulton, we don't compare ourselves to anyone because we have our own way of doing things, and we do things the right way. You know, there are times where we even collectively, we look at the mission and try to focus on providing service to the citizens. So no matter what, I think the city manager kind of alluded to the discussions and work we're doing with the employee association, which I'll kind of get into later on. But I just want you to make sure that our focus is providing service to you and the citizens of South Fulton. So we kind of set ourselves above, and with the tools and equipment and apparatus and everything you've been able to afford to give us, we're definitely moving in the right direction. Next slide, please. So this is a kind of a quick overview of what we do and what we need to do it. It's kind of a collage photograph of, you know, a lot of times we look at nowadays that working fires is kind of one of the small percentage of what we do in general. I think the biggest impact for us as a department, we look at the community risk reduction piece of it, because that's when we get a chance to actually interface with the customers. Look at exactly how the biggest impact to represent our department is when you look at those community events. We can go in and we can interface with the customer. We can tell them what we do, and we can tell them why we're out here. Because if we only use working fires as a representation of our worth to the city government, we will be way behind.
Excuse me. We got feedback in the background. Would someone please mute their phones or whatever device you're working with? Go ahead, Chief.
Okay, sorry about that. So when you look at it, if we use fire as just a representation of our worth to the city, you have to kind of question exactly, are we worth the money? But when you look at the other things we do, as far as talking about the community events and working in with the community, working with city council and kind of being a mentor to some of the young women and men out there in the city to kind of want to do what we do, our participation and our, it's immeasurable. We start to look at it from that aspect. And we talked a lot about some of the things we want to do as far as those initiatives this morning. So we'll kind of maybe gloss over a few of them, but that's just a snapshot of exactly what we do. And as you see, as we go out and provide that service, we'll always do that with a smile, because we want to make sure that the people know that we want to be there to work with them. And so the next slide, I kind of mirrored some of my slides, or a lot of my slides from Chief Meadows. And so when you look at our administrative breakdown, we look at the 100, and I think our numbers now are closer to 160. But as you, as city manager, alluded to, we migrated over from Fulton County with the fire chief, 2 deputy chiefs, and the rest of the complement of personnel. And we still have a few vacancies to fill in those upper ranks, but of our current staffing strength is about 160. So if you look at the demographic breakdown, I want to make sure I allude to one thing, because my math was off. When you look at our actual numbers, of our numbers are closer to 8.125 for female representation. And when you look at command staff, including captains and above, we're a little over 2% or so. So I want to make sure I alluded to that. Even though that number is a little better than what's projected, it's still nowhere near where it should be. I think if you look at the representation of the potentials in our department, we want to make sure that all of our employees get great opportunities for upward growth and mobility. But we got to make sure we emphasize on making sure that our workforce look like our citizens. And I'll give you, I guess, a small story when I've said that before in the past, that your department should be a representation of what your community looks like. Some people look at it as like that's almost a distasteful statement, but it is. But when you look at as a young male or female look at their fire department, if they only see one demographic and they're not part of that demographic, they don't see a future in that department for them. So we always want to make sure that there's representation. I've had opportunities where young ladies apply for jobs in the fire department because they see a young lady working for the fire department. So they realize that potential is there for them. So we always want to make sure as we go out and look at branding and we look at opportunities that we always hold ourselves high and we represent, because even if we don't have an application process out there, we're still always looking. So I want to make sure we reinforce that point about statistics and, and demographics and whatnot. So our workforce is strong, but we are still moving in a good direction. We're currently doing applications for sworn firefighters. And I want to make sure that I emphasize it. We have a really great team at City of South Fulton. Our personnel between operations and administrative, they are jam up. I've worked with a lot of departments, and I'm definitely appreciative of the fact and contributions of my staff here. They exceed my expectations at times, because me still kind of getting to know them, when I tackle with a task, they're right here to help me and to step in like, Chief, we got you. And that's a breath of fresh air for me, because I don't have to shoulder that burden. And so my team they're very, very good at what they do. So next slide, please. So I think I showed you guys this before about a little bit of breakdown, and we've already talked about some of the vacancies. And I believe once we get a chance and flesh out and blow out the org chart a little bit more, you'll see definitely a service that your city is deserving of. You'll see more impact on community risk reduction with the Citizen Fire Academy, the youth group interactions. You'll see us actually move in a direction that you've never seen before. And I definitely will give that commitment to you, because what I definitely want to do is to make sure that you understand that I'm listening to what your needs are. And so when there's an idea of the direction you want to see us go, I'm definitely all ears, because I realize that I can't do this based on Sterling's perspective. It's all about what the citizens want and your representation of that body. So I'm definitely let you know that I am all ears in how we move down and move into our future next. Next slide, please. So we've had some key additions to our rank structure this year, just this calendar year. Myself coming on, I came on a little bit, and I think maybe the first week in February, and Chief Lay came behind me. And Chief Lay is probably one of the strongest officers. I think if Chief Broom would have been able to stay here, we'd have almost had a dream team, because all of us being former fire chiefs, we have the innate ability to understand exactly what the sections need, and we don't have to be necessarily taught on those exactly objectives. So having Chief Lay here is definitely a plus for me, because we can have a discussion about a task and objective, and Chief Lay's going and he's doing his thing. And also we had an opportunity to bring in Lieutenant Rowe in from Valdosta. So Lieutenant Rowe is definitely one of our sharpest new employees. She brings a wealth of knowledge, and she's the kind of person you'll see working on our disaster plan. So I'm entrusting that responsibility to her, and she's taking it. And I just kind of mentioned it, and she's taking it and running with it. So she's definitely one of our sharp, hard chargers. And so we talked before about the 27 new recruits and the 15 safer positions. And so next slide, please. So we start talking about some of our major accomplishments, and we start looking at the opportunities we've had through grant funding. I mean, I want to make sure I recognize, Natalie and Latanya and Kelly and, Captain Hall and all of the participants that helped move us well in that direction with this grant stuff. And these people are just above measure. We start looking at those opportunities for us to go back and be recipients of this funding, knowing that anybody that's ever applied for a grant, that these things are competitive. So, when we're looking for those monies or trying to solicit those funds, we're competing with other jurisdictions. And so being able to afford, I've never been involved with a department that's received so much grant money. And I'm looking at it as, wow, we should have been doing this years ago, speaking from another department. But the staff, with the assistance of Kelly, our folks are doing really well. And you can just look at that dollar contributions and realize that money is something that we didn't have to pay for out of our budget. This was something we've able to be able to get to kind of meet some of those initiatives that we have for a department. And we'll make sure that we make good use of that money. And then we're still always looking for potential money out there. So that's why I want to mention briefly those potential grants. Now, I'm not going to give you that impression like that this grant has already been awarded, but those are the things that when those opportunities present themselves, they were always looking for those avenues to tap into being able to get something to benefit the city and move us in a stronger position. Next slide, please. So we want to kind of highlight some of our things before. The department, we've, with COVID-19, even we've grown and had to change a lot of things that we've done in the past. And this is just some example of some of the new additions to current policies. We've had to either write correctly out the fly, or we've had to modify existing how we do things. COVID has changed exactly the way I think everybody does, as far as quality of living for you, but also affects exactly how we operate and how we respond. And I think the biggest impact for us is when you start to look at, by one department or one person coming to work affected with COVID, how the impact of that from an organizational standpoint. And so I wanted to let you know that we are committed to providing the best service we can while still keeping COVID in the forefront of our operations and processes. You start looking at Marcus Williams and Lieutenant Lavallee and Chief Lay, and we're in conjunction moving a lot of things at one time, and Chris Walker and all the folks to make sure our facilities are clean, make sure our personnel are tested. So we're doing everything in our power to make sure that our employees can report to work safe, and if something happens, that they're well taken care of and they're moving in a consistent direction. So those policies and things that you're seeing here are just a small representation of things that we're doing to make sure our folks are safe. Okay, next slide, please. So these are some of the new additions we have in, and you see some of the stuff for URA. So these are the things, I didn't tap into all the apparatus, but just the newest addition to our fleet, which is Truck 7. You'll start to see Truck 7 spin off, and that's the newest on down on Buffington, where Truck 7 is. And then you see in the lower right picture is our new SCBAs. The SCBAs are a self-contained breathing apparatus, which is the state of art. This is the newest thing out there. They come with thermal imaging cameras, and these things are it. So there's nothing better out there on the market than what we've been able to get provided for our firefighters. So this thing puts us into a position where we're moving higher and higher, as the city manager alluded to, receiving old equipment and old stations. We're moving ourselves in the position now that we're actually starting to get above all that and leave all that stuff behind us. And that position, that picture in the top right, is just another example of Chief Dingler and Lieutenant Salamaka going out to provide the service. And you've probably seen that in the past when you start to looking at some of our fire prevention folks and community risk reduction folks. We always want to take an opportunity that we can go out and we can brand. So when you see our folks out there, that picture is a representation of us. As you see the look and the enthusiasm and the attire of our people, because that's a reflection of us. You see the neatly display out there, because when I want people to walk past and look at our workstation, they look in and I want to go automatically, I want to draw their eye to over there and see what they got going on in the fire department. So we're a reflection of that. And so this is just a small snippet of things that we can provide for our smoke detectors. I mean, we're going to blow out some service this year that's going to probably amaze you exactly how much stuff that we do. Next slide, please. And so we're going to start talking about some more things that we've kind of been fortunate to do. We talked this morning about some of the ISO stuff, so I'm not going to delve really hard into that, but let you know that everything we do as far as getting the best rating is to try to move us closer and closer to that ISO 1. So that is part of our commitment to you from the fire team with all of us to you, that we are moving towards that direction. And everything that we do is going to be kind of in that purpose, from hiring the firefighters to getting the mobile data terminals on board, to getting those automatic aid agreements with the contiguous departments. All that's moving us into that direction. Like I said, there's more components to ISO than just the automatic aid agreements. It's related to training. It's related to, training in the proper category. So a lot of things you see, it's all for a purpose to move us closer and closer to that category 1. Next slide, please. So these are also some of the stuff that we're doing. When we start to look at knowing that our firefighters and fire personnel is our number 1 resource, we made a commitment to make sure that we try to increase their quality of life. And this is not just at work. This is something happens after work. Statistically, if you start looking at fire protection employees, once they retire, within 5 years after post-retirement, that's when that's when they pass away. And it's typically because as you go back through our careers, a lot of practices we did when I first came on the job are no longer common practice. So a lot of things as far as wearing self-contained breathing apparatus, getting firefighter physicals and all that stuff that we're committed to doing, that stuff wasn't happening 10 or 15 years ago, because that's wasn't something that people had either the wherewithal to do or they had the financial commitment to do. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure when our employees leave and they give a full service to the citizens of South Fulton, they can have a long and healthy afterlife and retirement after their career is over. So these are just some of the steps that we'll do, that we have done, and we are doing to make sure that that happens for our employees, because that's our commitment to them as well. Next slide, please. So we just pulled some of the statistics from June, and just to kind of let you know some of the things we're doing when you look at the slides in comparison to the city. And we separate FID from another district from our other responses. These are just some of the stuff we're doing. And so we're trying to capture everything that we do so you can kind of see exactly what your fire department, what your money is at work. So this responding from the structure fires and the service calls. And so we're active in the community. We're not just sitting back in the station kind of doing things. We're always going out making sure that you understand that you have a viable service in the fire department. And we're going to give it everything we can to make sure you understand that we're going to put our posts. Some of your statistics over there as far as the education, we're falling behind because of COVID had a big impact on us. As far as a lot of the initiatives that we had planned, COVID probably put a damper. And so those contacts have been falling off, and we'll just have to come up with more creative ways of making sure we have those community touches. But this is just a snippet from a 1 month and a year to date exposure from the fire department from a response and a community risk reduction. Next slide, please. So we talked, I know Councilmember Geary had a long conversation about the state and condition of our stations, and I know the city manager kind of alluded to it as well. So I want you to know this is just a picture of your stations and equipment and things we have to do for the upgrades. Now, we're not going to talk about specifically facility replacement in this. We're talking about strictly renovations. So we're talking about as we go back, and I know Councilman Willis mentioned something about the remaining items of Station 1. So I want to make sure that you understand that all stations and facilities are listed in these next few slides. but then there are going to be more things we're going to do in associated with the URA to make sure we make up the fire department as habitable as possible. So you can just kind of keep it glancing through the next few slides, please. So I just identified each station has a list of upgrades based on the things we have to fix. And so we're going to work really strong in conjunction with Public Works until we can make sure that the firefighters have the best that we can get for them. So next slide. So as you go through, this is just a picture of all your stations. There's nothing substantive in those things off the left because all of them need the state of our facilities we got from the county. All of them need the same things. They need vital updates. They need inside and outside and structural components. So this is, I don't want to dwell on just all the stuff, but all of them in general, in a nutshell, from top to bottom, need work, and we're committed to making that happen. So here's some of the things we've been able to do. A lot of things based on where we are, but there are still some operational challenges that we have to be faced with. And I alluded to one of them before when you start looking at the mass personnel who quarantines and isolations. To give you an example, we've had several stations we've had to close and be sanitized for COVID. But the operational impact I want to make sure that you capture is when we have one station closure or one person comes in that gets infected or exposed on duty or off duty, all that stuff kind of snowballs in as you look at exactly if that station's going to be operational to respond to your specific district. So I want to make sure you understand that there is impact there. So we've been able to do a lot of things in the way we respond. I'll give you an example of that last bullet. Right now, when you see a fire truck pull in to an emergency, medical emergency, typically one person is going in, they're interface with the customer. You know, the rest of the people are staying outside into the clean air and they're dressed out, but they're not going to go in. That way, one person can go in, make the initial patient contact, and they're with gloves and goggles and gowns and, mask, everything else is on. So when they make that contact, it reduces the exposure from patient to from us to from the patient from the responder. And then if needed, they summon their extra crews in. And so that limits the contact from the customer to us. So that's one of the procedures we've done in the past to kind of make sure we minimize that exposure. One of the things we want to look at is the greater advocacy of EMS control. Right now, as you understand, that Grady is an EMS provider. They have control of the zone. But sometime we're going to have those discussions later on about as far as if our needs are being met. So for those that don't know, status level 0 is when Grady has no units available. So we start to look at the potential can happen if they don't have a unit available for transport to the hospital. Now, the fire department will always be there, the next closest unit available to respond to that medical emergency. But if you look at the actual, the golden hour or the term from contact all the way to transport to the hospital, that time can be affected if there's no transport units available to actually get that patient to the hospital. So we're going to make a conscious effort to start to measure those status level 0 notifications and find a way that we can make sure we still deliver a great service and still operate within where we are. So also here, start looking at the PPE delays. We're still, the purpose of us going out and hitting the personal protective equipment is one of the delays is because each gear is measured for that person. It's the equivalent of going in and getting a tailor-made suit from a tailor. So when they measure the turnout gear for the fire chief, they're looking at the gear to fit specifically to me. So when you start to look at those custom gears, it's good if we have an inventory and a stockpile that's where we want to go, that we have gear sitting on the shelf. But some of those delays because we still have to get stuff in for the vendor. It's a lot of other things that factor into. So because right now we have recruits that are ready to go out. We just got turnout gear within a couple weeks ago. So now we can move those into the next phase of training and closer to moving them into the station and start having some relief to the station. So that's kind of how all that ties into. And kind of work uniforms is kind of the same thing. Next slide, please.
So, Mayor, as we kind of close out, I think you've heard kind of how we started to how we finished. And so now, collectively, between Chief Meadows and Chief Sterling, there are 7 key steps to make sure we have a world-class public safety system. And I think they're not only reflected in the budget, but more importantly, they've been clearly stated by our council on what direction we need to go in. And so these are the big buckets. One, I think I've heard each of you kind of highlight, the need for gender diversity in our public safety leadership. And I think police has been a quality reflection of that equitable distribution. And so now Chief Sterling, as a new guy, has been given the challenge to ensure that the gender diversity also is existent in our fire ranks. Also, and these are in no particular order, but lowering the ISO rating and passing those cost savings on the residents is one of our key focuses. We also have to make sure we centralize our public safety services. And so you have allocated the funding. I know you are evaluating a bunch of different alternatives based on the COVID pandemic, but we are focused on responding to the will of the council and centralizing those services. And I think the council has petitioned the state, and it's our job to try to get a seat back on the firefighters council, fire chiefs council, to ensure that we get our own license to deliver emergency services. That data, what Chief highlighted, is that about 80% of our calls are EMS related calls. And so if we have greater control over those services, no disrespect to Grady, because they're giving us much better service than we've received in the past, but it's not as good as the South Fulton way. And so if we can get control over that, then that will help us deliver even better services to our residents. We also have to make sure that they have enough staff members to deliver the service, so we have no reason to have delays in the delivery of services. And while that reduction of 20% crime reduction in overall crime is great, we want to continue that trend and make sure we reduce violent crimes in every district. And then finally, it has been well documented that we inherited a ton of challenges in our facilities, and the council has been extraordinarily clear that that's not good enough for our staff members. And so we 100% agree and stand ready to make sure that we implement not only the URA, but I know you have some tough decisions ahead on how you want to invest. And so not only here to support the will of the council, but make sure we implement based on what your decisions are. And so with that, that concludes this presentation. And I hope it's given a clear overview of where we've come, where we are, and where we're going.
Very good. Thank you all so much, both chiefs. I think it was great for our citizens to see exactly what we do in area of public safety. Ms. Willis, you had a question.
Yes, there was, I want to go back to Chief Meadows. There was one thing, that component, and there was legislation that I worked on that was missing out of your presentation, and I want to update on it. And that's the speed enforcement. There were Renaya Majors speed enforcement cameras.
Right. Well, actually, we started off the year, Councilwoman, very well with it. And as you could imagine, with the pandemic and the schools shutting down, all of our enforcement activity around that kind of stopped. And so with schools starting back up, we're ready to actually ramp up. Now, it's my understanding that a majority of the 16 cameras are up now. I will get an update on the remaining cameras. Last time I checked, I think we had about 4 or 5 cameras that still had not gone up, and they were waiting for some permits to come through on them. But a bulk of those cameras are up, and we had quite a few in the first month and a half of school. I think we had some 300 or 400 violations after the warning period went through. And so they seem to be very effective. And we noticed that shortly after the violations started coming through, that people started slowing down going through our school zones, but we were still getting more violations than we actually wanted to see come through the school zone. So hopefully, as the schools ramp back up, some of them will be doing virtual learning. I don't know how the law is going to work. I'm going to have to reach out or get with the city attorney, because some schools will do virtual learning and some will do in-class learning. And so we have to make sure that we're consistent with whatever the law will allow us to do with respect to those cameras.
So is there any way that you can give me a report, or I mean, not only me, but the entire council, a report on what cameras have been installed and what cameras are left to be installed, and when a ETA, when those cameras are going to be installed? I'll
have the vendor put that together for us now, and we'll get it out to you
And a follow-up question is there any way that he can determine how the cameras have impacted the speed rate through the speed zones? I mean, through the school zones. I know, like you said, they did shut down and go to virtual, but we're not going to be in virtual forever. But does he have any data that can tell us how the cameras impacted the speed? I mean, the
violations.
Yeah, the violations.
Right. Yeah, he did, and right after the first month or two, I'm wanting to say, and don't quote me on this, I wanted to say it was like a 30% reduction. That's why I said it's still nowhere near where we want it to be. We wanted to go down much further than that, Councilwoman, but he does keep track of that. And so did you want the data from earlier this year, or did you want us to start giving it to you moving forward?
If he can tell me what data he has from the cameras that have already been installed. I know we put one at Seaborn Lee, we put one, whatever cameras that were out, I would like data from that, because I would like to report to my constituents how this camera has helped reduce speed in the school zones.
Very good. Absolutely.
All right.
All right. Is that it, Ms. Willis?
Yeah, that's it. I just want people to see how effective this policy has been.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Willis, and thank you both chiefs. Mr. Manager, is CDRA ready with their presentation?
Yes, sir, they are.
Okay, let's bring them on.
Ms. Cummings is available and on the line. Ms. Cummings, when you're ready, feel free to jump in.
Good afternoon or good evening, Mayor and Council. The paper that is before you is a conservation easement agreement between the City of South Fulton and D.R. Horton. So there are several ways that a developer, they have to basically pay the city restitution when they decide to do a development for cutting down trees. And so one of the ways that's outlined administratively in our code that they can meet this recompense requirement is that they can either write a check to the city to pay for those trees, or they can deed a conservation easement and a piece of property to the city that would remain undeveloped and untouched for the entirety in perpetuity. And so the benefits of this particular agreement is that we have a 16-acre parcel that will remain in its natural conservation state for this particular development. D.R. Horton is basically going to develop 48 homes that will contribute to the tax digest. The other 8 properties are not going to be developed, and then the city would essentially be the holder of this agreement. I also have on the line Miss Michelle McCauley from LeGraw Engineering. And if you have any technical questions about the conservation easement and the agreement, in your packet, I prepared kind of a briefing packet for you to go over the mechanics of this structure of this agreement, and the city's legal department also vetted the agreement for your review. So at this time, I will entertain any questions and ask Ms. Michelle McCauley if she's still on the line to unmute, and she can help answer those technical questions about the conservation easement agreement.
I have one. Ms. McCauley?
Yes, Mayor Edwards.
In terms of that conservation easement, it works like kind of like a transfer of development rights. But if in fact there is some damage to the property or some dumping to the property, is it still going to be the responsibility of D.R. Horton, or is that a responsibility of the city?
So this piece of property will be part of this is the latest phase, or phase 6 of Regency Oaks. It's going to be titled on Regency Oaks. It will not be a part of the Regency Oaks HOA, but they're establishing a new homeowners association. The homeowners association will own this property. The city will just be holding the deed of conservation easement. If there's any damage or anything that happens on the property, it'll be the responsibility of the homeowners association.
Okay.
Be undeveloped. It will be, like you mentioned, the transfer development rights. It's similar in that sense. It'll be property that's left in its natural undeveloped state and cannot be developed. in the future.
I got you. I got you. That answers my question. Any other questions? Is this is not an action item? I don't think it's just a conversation. Am I correct?
That is correct. This is just for discussion. If
All right.
you agree to go, if you move it to your regular agenda, then it would give the city CDRA on permission
I got
on behalf, to enter into an agreement.
I got you.
Right.
Okay. Any further questions from anybody?
No, well, Mayor, I just wanted to share that this is in District 2, and I have sat down with CDRA and DR Horton, and we have thoroughly gone through this. So this is something that I think is a good thing for us as a city. So I just want to let you all know, and my colleagues know, that we've done our due diligence and that I do support this.
Very good. All right. Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you all so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Mr. Donald, that was an adjacent piece to this. What was that?
Yeah, it was just one last piece, and it was about the CDRA, CDBG opportunity with the county. We actually had a meeting with the county today, and I thought it was pertinent to give the council information since we had this work session, and it will require very quick action from the city. So we have revisited with the county on CDBG funding for the current fiscal year, and kind of made a petition to ensure that we have access to those funds. I sent the full council a update on that about a week or two ago, and so the actual meeting was held today. And so we met with Fulton County leadership. We discussed those activities to potentially access is 2 pots of money, not just one. The first pot is program dollars that they must expend by September 30th. So it has to be a shovel-ready project. Number 2 is access to the upcoming CDBG funds, with the application being published in September of 2020, both of which are quickly approaching. And so we had a technical assistance call today to make sure that we're ready to take those on, and it should alleviate some of the pressures on our budget. So I know we are planning to consider funding items, and we should, but I think as we look at how we allocate the contingency and things of that nature, it should give us some breathing room if we're successful. So Fulton County is anticipating about $2 million in annual funds from HUD coming to them. 15% of them have to be for public services for nonprofit organizations who serve low to moderate income residents. A 65% of that $2 million is a pool for city projects, and then 20% will go to Fulton County for admin. That's how they break up their HUD allocation. And so the expiring funds, they did not tell us how much was available, but we were tasked with identifying a shovel-ready project that we're going to submit as early as tomorrow. So CDRA is coordinating with Parks and Rec to identify this capital project. It's around revamping the HVAC systems that have given us problems throughout the city. And so we're going to work multiple proposals simultaneously. So the reason we would be looking at that HVAC project versus some of the others is because they have a 30 to 45 day environmental requirement that this we are hoping would be exempt from, and allow us to kind of just do the procurement portion, acquire the funds, and get it done. And so it's really the only way to, kind of, if not avoid, successfully streamline any hopes of streamlining that.
Okay, go ahead.
We'll get in the details. I just want to make sure I go quickly in the interest of time, because you'll likely have some questions. But the logistics considerations for the city of South Fulton on both projects are this. One, we've got to submit a completed application to Fulton County for consideration. we will need some sort of resolution or legislation so that we can anticipate the appropriate funding. And so we will work with the council on that in between now and the next regularly scheduled meeting. I doubt that we have to call a special call meeting, but again, we will bring all of that information forth as quickly as possible because we've already set up a follow-up meeting with the county. We'd also have to identify a funding source so that we're not supplanting funds. So for the match or those existing CDBG dollars require a reimbursement to draw down. So whichever area in which we have some room left in this FY20 budget, we'd identify that as the funding line or make the appropriate adjustments through an amendment or whatever it was required. So we'd be able to draw down and get reimbursed for the cost of the project. That would also need to be done through the FY21 budget for the future project because their fiscal year that we're not eligible for HUD, remember they're on a different cycle, would begin during our next fiscal year. For Fulton County, they have some logistical considerations as well. And so they're aligning this to fit with their Board of Commissioners meeting. They also have to have a legislative process to execute a contract, which is why our deadline for submitting a project is tomorrow. To make sure that we meet the 30 days, get it on their agenda in advance of that so that they can be pre-approved, consider and pre-approved. And then we have to complete the appropriate environmental reviews that has an approximate 30-day requirement. And these funds must be drawn down and expended by September 30th, meaning we will be working through whether it be procurement, allocation, et cetera, so that when they approve it, we can simply pay the vendor and request reimbursement within the same time. That's for number one, the reprogram dollars that they have to spend or they lose. And then simultaneously, us in competition with other cities will have to do an application for projects that would be, let's say, sidewalks, retention ponds. I know I mentioned at least those two. And bridge repairs would all qualify for those funds in that September 20th September of 2020 allocation. And I think we highlighted today some of those capital needs that we don't currently have the available funding for. This could provide us a much needed lifeline. And so that's a very quick overview, simply to give you an opportunity to ask questions, but to also make you aware. And as this just happened, as you know, we met at 3:15 and we started this call at 4 o'clock. And so I am looking through my notes so that if you have specific questions or if you would like me to give you some insights on the project, I can tell you the one that we're potentially looking at short term.
Okay. Seeing Mr. Khalid, Chair recognizes Mr. Khalid.
Hey, thanks so much, Mr. Donald. It sounds like this is something that we need to take action on this evening.
I don't know if it's necessary action. I think since we would just be doing an application and you would have to do the legislative portion later, what the plan would be is to discuss, and with the HVAC system, I think it's been pretty clear that our HVAC in the summer times and some of the areas where it's gone out and those systems need to be replaced is a vital need and something that would alleviate some pressure on the URA and let you reallocate funding. If there's consensus of the council, we would simply submit the application. You don't have to direct us. You don't have to do anything until we actually bring it back to you, where we would have to work with you on a resolution and all of those good things. But you don't have to do that today. You just have to say, hey, this works for us, pursue the money and put us in position to approve it. And if you believe that's the right mode of action, then we would move forward accordingly. You got a little bit more time on the actual vetting of potential projects where we could do a formal presentation before submitting an application for the September 2020 funds, now that we know that they're coming down the pipeline.
Okay, so that sounds like a decision, and I just want us to be in order because this is not on the agenda. Should we make a motion to amend the agenda to add this item? Madam Clerk?
Madam Attorney, will we need to do that, or could we actually take a consensus and have him move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's somewhat germane to what you've been talking about anyway. I mean, you can do the motion out of caution. I don't think you necessarily need to, though.
I mean, I'm in support, so whatever we need to do, I just want to make sure we do it in the right way. That's it.
Oh, in formation of that motion, what should it sound like?
Well, if you want to limit the discussion to just what Khalid's requested, I would say I move that we amend the agenda to include discussion on, and then have Khalid clarify. So Councilman Khalid, can you make that motion? So that you can provide clarity on what specifically you want the discussion to be limited to.
Mr. Khalid?
Councilmember Khalid, you're muted.
Hey, I'm sorry. I'm not clear on what we're asking, but I mean, I make a motion to amend the agenda to have discussion about CDBG funds.
Is there a second?
Second.
Properly moved in second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Khalid?
I think that's. Well, I guess we just call for the vote.
Yeah, I mean, there's no discussion. Okay, all those, Madam Clerk, would you call the vote, please?
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Gomes?
Yes.
Councilmember Willis?
Yes.
Councilmember Gilliard?
Aye.
Councilmember Gilliard?
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves?
Aye.
Councilmember Khalid?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
So Mayor, I think he just basically added the conversation to the agenda, and your question, the overall question for the council was, I think the reason I'm bringing this to your attention, you normally do not approve the applications, only the receipts. And so this is, we didn't have enough time to provide you a memorandum, like literally this just happened, but the timeline is extremely short. So what we're doing as staff is making you aware of it so that if you're in favor of it, we would simply put in the application to make sure we can stay within the timeline.
And that's exactly what they told you to do.
Yes, sir. And so
Yeah.
I'm just making sure to let you know that, how do I say this? We are simply just giving you notification. And so if you're against it, then we would not, it's gonna take a lot of effort for staff over the next 24 hours. I think you saw earlier today, Ms. Cummins was still, transitioning from the meeting and our processes to try to get this done and report, to the council on the other item. So if you're against it, we would just stop. If you're for it, we would keep moving, and then we would bring it back to you when it's time for you to approve the fund.
And once again, think that's what the motion was about. And I think you need to move forward on it. If I'm wrong, Mr. Khalid or someone tell me if I'm wrong.
The motion was just to add the item for discussion to the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, there's consensus on the council. I mean, we didn't say it, but there's consensus on the council for him to move forward.
So why don't we do this? Madam Clerk, Madam Attorney?
Yes, Mayor.
Can we just make a motion that's styled in the way that Mr. Donald was explaining so we can move forward?
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah, I think we're ready now, Mayor. It's just for the record because.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we got
I make a motion that we move forward with this application.
And so, Mr.
Let me get it's the motion is made. I need a second.
Point of order, Mayor.
What is your point of order?
We don't vote on action items during work sessions. What I stated is that what we should do is just get consensus and tell him if we got consensus for him to move on, we can just let him move on and
Okay.
a 7 o'clock meeting.
Okay, so
Behind on.
I'm going to allow you a point of order because it's procedural. Madam Counsel.
Yes, Mayor.
And looking at her issue, would you opine on that, please?
Yeah, you guys have historically not voted on documents during the workshop. I mean, I don't recall you guys ever putting a document up for vote. I mean, you don't have an explicit rule that says we cannot do it, but as a matter of practice, you've never done it. Mr. Donald, are you asking them to approve the resolution that
Absolutely
authorizes us to move forward today? Is that what you're
No,
asking them to approve?
No, ma'am. So we were given a short time frame by Fulton County to move this forward. We always put on record what we're going after and what we're doing. And with such a short time frame, there's no time for a memo. This is simply an update for the council. If they were opposed to it, then this gives them a forum outside of our normal channels. And so there's no action needed because there's been no stated opposition. The council has been put on record that of what the process is. Ms. White would record it as the clerk is on record. We're all on the same page and an update has been provided. That's all.
Okay.
I think we're good to go.
So
Okay.
we're all right where we are. Am I, Madam Attorney?
Yeah, that's correct. It sounds like he's saying there's no document to be approved.
Right, we're fine.
Right. Okay, that's fine. All right, thank you so much, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, that's the end of the agenda.
I'm sure there's a motion to be made at this time.
I move that we adjourn our work session for August 12th, 2020.
Second.
I do have litigation items.
I get it, but I mean.
It's been moved and second. Any discussion? Come on, Miss Attorney, say what you guys say. Discussion.
So I thought we have a meeting that's supposed to start at 7 o'clock. A public hearing.
What meeting is it starting?
I thought that was canceled.
That was canceled, Councilmember Willis. The millage rate meeting was canceled.
Okay, well, I rescind my motion. Do we need to go into executive session?
Yeah, I need to get, there are some litigation items.
Okay, let's do, your motion is to go into executive session, or is your motion to
I
close?
move that we go into executive session for litigation, personnel, and real estate.
Okay, properly moved and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Let's go to executive session.
Need to take the vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, take a vote.
Councilmember Rao.
Yes.
Councilmember Gums.
Yes.
Councilmember Willis.
Yes.
Councilmember Gilliard.
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves.
Aye.
Councilmember Khalid.
No.
Councilmember Baker.
Aye.
I'm sorry.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The motion passes. We're recessed for executive session.
Okay.
Make a motion that we reconvene.
Second.
Properly moved and second. In discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Rao is not here. Councilmember Gums.
Aye.
Councilmember Willis. Councilmember Gilliard.
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves.
Aye.
Councilmember Khalid.
Yes.
Councilmember Baker is not present. You have a quorum.
Okay.
Motion passes.
Okay, Madam Clerk, do I have any actions that were taken in the back that I need to deal with now?
Yes, that's one.
Did you found that action?
It was an action for the city attorney.
Yes, and I'm actually sending the motion right now.
Okay, who you sending it to?
Councilwoman Gums, is that okay if I send it to you?
That's fine. Yes.
Councilwoman Gum, do you have that?
I don't have it yet, Mayor.
Okay.
Okay, I just sent it.
Okay. I move that we afford the city attorney the discretion to accept service on behalf of the city for interpleader, I'm assuming, interpleader, quiet title, and special master actions.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Properly moved and second. Discussion. Hearing none, Madam Clerk, will you take the roll, please? The vote.
Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Gums,
Yes.
Councilmember Willis,
Yes.
Councilmember Gilliard,
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves,
Aye.
Councilmember Khalid.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Is there any other items pending before us?
Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Let me get let me get the answer from who I asked from first.
No,
Madam
sir,
Clerk?
it's not.
Okay, Miss Willis, you can make your motion.
I already made it.
I second it.
Been properly moved and second. Any discussion?
Oh.
Hearing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Gums,
Yes.
Councilmember Willis,
Yes. Good night.
Councilmember Gilliard,
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Mr. Gilliard.
Councilmember Reeves,
Aye.
Move on to the next person
Councilmember
because
Khalid.
we want to keep the schedule maintained.
Yes.
Motion passes. Adjourned.
Yes.
Have a good
the
evening.
rapid fire schedule will be
Thank you all. South Fulton forever.